Welcome to the Young and Pruitt podcast. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by youngandpruitt.com. If you haven't checked it out, please be sure to make your way over there. If you're listening to this podcast, please give us a shout out on Twitter or Instagram. Let us know what you think, who you might want on. And yeah, just give us some feedback. We want to know what you guys think of the show. You know, you can call me a stutterbox. You can say David sits too far away from the mic, or you can say that we sound better than we look. Either way, be sure to check everything out. Holler at us.
This is for you, not for us.
Today on the podcast, we have Tim Petchek. He is a aerodynamic guru, as David tells me. He's been a long-time racer. What got you started in racing, man?
I had an uncle that short track raced Florida and Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina, just the southeast stuff. He had a 2-car late model team. He had sponsorship from Ford and won a lot of races, quite a few track championships. He actually used to race against David Rudiman's grandpa and brothers and those guys. So he was that group of cats that raced in Florida in the 60s and the 70s.
The Ford backing, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it was Bunnell Ford, Bunnell, Florida.
What brought you up here? Just wanting to continue in through racing, or?
I was Central Florida was a good place to live, and I'm sure there was a lot of opportunity there. But I knew that he was a race car driver. His name was J.D. Lewis, and his car numbers were, he drove 289, and then his other car was 298. And then if he didn't drive, he always had a driver in him. But I just always thought he was the coolest dude. And I just wanted to be around him, and we talked about it, and I told my mom, I said, I want to move to Chipley. I want to be around my Uncle JD, and that's how it got started.
What was the move from Florida up to here?
Well, that was in my plan the whole time, and Sundays was all about watching the Cup race. Mm-hmm. That's what we did. And when the Cup race was over, we went to his speed shop. And we worked, till midnight. He did things his own way, and that's what I thought was so cool. He did everything with cash, so he didn't owe nobody any money. So when he bought his place in a little town called Chipley, Florida, it was right on Highway 90. He was actually going to race in Pensacola, and mm-hmm. Highway 90 was the road that you drove on before I-10 was done. Mm-hmm. And he saw that building, and and it was kind of like halfway between all the places where he raced. And so they spent the night, got a motel room, called the number, went and made the deal at the bank the next day. And then he had him a place that was, halfway between, Ocala and Mobile and Pensacola and Hialeah and St. Petersburg. All these tracks that they were running at, Lake City, New Smyrna, mm-hmm. If they came to Concord, if they ran somewhere in Georgia, it was just a much more central location. The cost of living was a lot less because it was pretty much a rural area, so it was pretty much surrounded by farmland. Mm-hmm. And so it was I believe it was a 40 by 60 block building, and it had 2x4 trusses and a tin roof. That's what that's what I remember about it. So it's about as old school as you can get, and I can remember, my whole, all my science projects either had something to do with an internal combustion engine or some kind of fabrication or some kind of aerodynamics, whether it was a wind tunnel or something, So he helped me build this project one time that was going to show you how an internal combustion engine worked. And so it was like a little piece of plywood, and we had put a freeze plug over the end of a piece of galvanized tube that had some threads on top of it, and we took the center out of a spray paint can because, it's got a spray paint lid on a spray can, it's mm-hmm. got like 2 things in there. So we cut the middle one out, and it would fit over the top of this galvanized tube. And he gave me one of his Mallory coils and a starter button, and we drilled a hole in the side of this thing, and we stuck the spark plug wire through there, and you could put some lighter fluid in it and then mm-hmm. hook it up to the battery, mm-hmm. and you could hit the switch, and it would light the air fuel mixture inside of it, and it'd blow the lid off the thing. So that was my science project. So it was always cool stuff like that. And I think I had a wind tunnel one where you would, made a case, and I used a hair dryer to send the wind through it, and venturied it down so it would speed it up. And I had bent a piece of welding wire and had strips of, it was either toilet paper or paper towel or something, so that you could actually take a dowel rod and push the other car in behind it and then watch the toilet paper, change directions and watch it go up onto the hood of the next car behind it and all that kind of stuff. So it was like you'd move it close, move it back, and it was all part of the demonstration of how, two cars could join together, and that's why they went faster when they drafted. So I was in 8th grade doing this stuff, 7th or 8th grade. So, I would just eat up with it forever. And then my Aunt Ginger that was married to my Uncle JD, her brother Steve had a dirt late model. And it was a brand new Larry Shaw car. So you're talking about like 1985. And this thing was just gorgeous. The chassis was baby blue, and this thing was all hand lettered, and it was number 27, and brand new aluminum wheels and bead locks. I mean, this thing's like a diamond, man. It's just beautiful. And so my Uncle Steve wants my Uncle JD to build him an engine for this car. So he builds him this insane stroked 351 Windsor for this car. And he was always ahead of his time. And he actually he made everything by hand. So he actually built a motor plate for this Ford engine that went between the timing cover on the front and went between the bell housing and the transmission on the back. And it had nuts welded to it. And you could literally take 8 bolts out of this thing, unhook the lines, and lift the motor out of it. There was no getting down on the ground or like nothing. So he, now that, everybody has billet engine plates now. Mm-hmm. Everything's CAD drawn billet engine plates. But I mean, this dude builds this with a grinder and a torch, and it's clean and beautiful and nice, and his deal was always, perfect's not good enough, so, and he was so old school that you didn't run over none of his air hoses. You didn't pull a plug of his out of the wall, like nothing. Like he'd get after you, he'd go pick a switch and get you. Like he was old school. And, you didn't hand him no greasy tools. He was a perfectionist. Mm-hmm. So like all the machine equipment he had, all the engine building equipment he had, he bought with hard-earned cash that he had saved or traded for, whatever the case might be. There was no loans or nothing. I mean, this was as self-made as you could get. So I had been around him for about a year, and I didn't know anything about wrench sizes or nothing. So like the first year I'm around him, you're learning all that stuff. You're learning shop etiquette, and you're learning how to take care of things, keep things clean. And we start this engine deal, and he's got a set of cylinder heads that he's already ported and polished before, and the other parts come in, and he bores the block. And to make a long story short, this thing is together on his engine stand. And I remember, we had like I don't even remember the brand of drill. It's probably like a Black & Decker. But he had a piece that went down to prime the oil. So he primed the oil with electric drill. Mm-hmm. Then he set the distributor down in there, and the cap wasn't on it. And he had his test light, and the battery's hooked to it. And he puts his test light. It was a mechanical dual point. And he puts a test light on one of the points in there, and he turns the thing, and when the light comes on, he locks it down, and he puts the cap on there and puts all the plug wires on. And Unical gear lube used to come in these really cool plastic bottles, like a little handle on them, and they had a tapered tip on them. Mm-hmm. So that you could, once you took a drain plug out, you could get it up into the hole before you started squeezing it. So because you had to squeeze it like into a rear end housing or into a transmission mm-hmm. case. Well, that didn't have gear oil in it. It had race gas in it. And what he did was he filled the bowls on the carburetor up with that bottle. And I remember him looking dead at me saying, are you ready? And I remember looking at him, I said, how do you know this thing's going to crank? And he said, this is going to crank. And so he hits the starter button. And I bet that thing didn't turn over half around, and it lit up, and it's got 180 headers on it, and it's just rattling the place, just running. And, that was just one of those defining moments, because that's when you're waking up every day and your spectrum on everything in life it's like a 180. And then it was like the instant that engine lit off, and then you had been part of that build, absolute tunnel vision after that. You didn't think about nothing else. All you thought about was building fire and steel, man. All you thought about was horsepower and how that sounded and how that felt and how that gratification felt. And it was life-changing. It was life-changing for me anyway. So that made my path pretty darn clear. Like, there was no questions after that. So I originally wanted to come to North Carolina and be an engine builder. So James Finch was a good friend of my uncle's, and James Finch was younger than him. So when my uncle's racing and having a big time and they're winning and going all over the place, James Finch would come to the races with him and hang out. And then as my uncle, got out of the sport and started doing other things, just machining and building engines for people, and James Finch became prominent, we were going to the races and hanging out with him. So you would hang out at his bus or his hauler or whatever the case may be. So you might be at Five Flag Speedway in Pensacola. You might be at a dirt track in Phoenix City, Alabama. Jeff Purvis was driving his stuff back then, and those cars were hand-built, hand-lettered. You're talking about mid to late 80s. Really, really neat stuff. And the guy that was building engines for him was a guy named Gary Dingler. So he was out of Cummings, Georgia. So you start meeting people as you're going to more and more races, and you just get to ask them, hey man, how'd you get started? How'd you do it? So anybody that's ever been successful in motorsports, if they ever told you that there was a lot of people that never helped them get to where they're at, I would have to call them a liar, because nobody figures it out on their own. It's all a process. It's all an evolution. It's all a build. So as far as positive and negative reinforcement goes, I wasn't one of those kids that you had to worry about bringing home a bad report card, because all I thought about is, how am I going to use school to help me when I get out? And so I took all the advanced math. I went all the way through analytic geometry. So you had algebra 1, algebra 2, pre-algebra was obviously first, trigonometry, geometry. And I took all that stuff because I was like, man, this is about camshafts and figuring the bore of a cylinder and the volume of a cylinder and CCs and using a barrette tube, and so that's why I took chemistry and physical science and all that, because I could actually use all these same tools that were in these nice engine shops, for CC and combustion chambers, to make sure all 8 of them were the same. They were all within a half a CC or whatever whatever the case was going to be. I was using all this stuff. So, I'm excited to go to school every day, because now I'm actually going to apply this to what I want to do. The other side of the coin is I used to draw a lot. So all my toys, from being younger, it was like Legos, Lincoln Logs, erector sets. You got to be kind of old to remember what an erector set was, but it was pieces that you could put together with screws and bolts and whatnot. And if you got the right set, it'd have an electric motor with it that ran on a battery, and you could make a car out of it or something like that. So I was always into that kind of stuff, build models, drawing, and I used to draw late models all the time. And I was in Food Line the other night getting some groceries, and I see a guy in there named Lee Falk. And this dude was one hell of a late model racer down in Florida. And I had his T-shirts when I was a kid, because as my uncle transitioned out of the driving part, he became a tech inspector at New Smyrna Speedway for the World Series of Asphalt Stock Car Racing every year. So he'd be down there for 2.5 weeks. And Lee Falk drove a car that was sponsored by it was called Champion. And what it was kind of like an Aaron's. You could rent to own, furniture from Champion. Mm-hmm. And his car was red, white, and blue. It was number 36. And I used to draw pictures of this guy's race car. So I see this dude in the Food Line the other night, and I walked up to him and I said, hey, Mr. Falk. And he says, hey, man, how you doing? I said, I'm J.D. Lewis's nephew. He was like, wow, that's he was never going to expect that in a million years. And I told him that, he had passed away a few years earlier, but I told him, I said, man, I wore the T-shirts with your cars on them. I used to draw your cars. So guys like Joe Shear and Lee Falk and Junior Hanley and Gary Ballou, David Rogers, Pete Orr, Ed Meredith, Leroy Porter, Frank Wood, all those guys, that Dickie Anderson, Jack Cook, all those guys, man, you'd go down there every February and you'd watch them. And then the modifieds would come. And we would go down there for the last weekend. So my uncle would leave, 2 weeks prior, and we always went down for the last weekend. Dick Trickle was there. And so then you'd see the modified. So you got Reggie Ruggiero and Rick Fuller and Jeff Fuller and Tommy Baldwin and all these cats. And what's so weird is that, I'm in the same pit area with people that I've worked shoulder to shoulder with now. So, and I didn't know them yet. So Bono Mannion, you know, I didn't know Bono. I didn't know Tommy Baldwin, you know, Jr. You know, there was a ton of those cats. Robbie Fuller, you know, I didn't know none of them dudes, but they end up being your friends that become family because everybody moved to North Carolina to chase their passion. So it was, there's a lot of layers to that thing, man. But, you know, back to the school thing. And no one, you know, watching Inside Winston Cup during the week, and you know,
Inside Winston Cup. Wow.
You know, that was the show I watched. You know, because that was my connect to North Carolina. You know, Steve Burns, the Pemberton, and then there was a Pemberton that did it, but I can't remember his name. And then Dale Jarrett's brother was on there too. But, you know, you'd see the inside of these shops and the floors painted, you know what I mean? And it's like, this is it, man. This is where I'm going, you know? And I had a really good opportunity to go into real estate. Really, really good. And I didn't do it. And I wanted to come race. And I don't regret it a bit. I mean, I've made the best friends in the world, you know, a lot of great accomplishments. It's been a hell of a ride, I can tell you that. It's So I pretty much what I did was, you know, I had a lot of people telling me, they're like, dude, you need to go to college. You are not going to make a living putting bodies on race cars. You're not going to do it. You're out of your mind. You have got to be the stupidest dude. You can't do this. Like, this is the biggest pipe dream ever, dude. Like, this is not going to happen. And I'm like, well, all right. So I enrolled in the junior college, and I went. And I didn't like it. I didn't like writing papers. I didn't like taking tests. So, you know, you've got this other passion over here on your shoulder that's just constantly knocking on you. And you know that what you're not doing is right. But you're doing what your elders are telling you that you should do. So I did 3 semesters, paying my own way, buying my own books, everything. Didn't care. You know, I'd go out to my Uncle Steve's in Louisiana. He had a big truck repair business on I-20. So, like, I'm whooping truck tires and putting brakes on them and wheel seals and greasing them and checking oil and changing oil and, you know, going out on the side of the road at nighttime and fixing airlines, you know, all these 18-wheelers right on I-20 because it was like the bumpiest stretch of road ever. So stuff was constantly tore up on it. So, you know, them Louisiana summers are hot up there, man. And you're talking about, you know, 100-degree days and, you know, changing truck tires on the side of the road. So I could make enough money to pay my tuition and buy my books and all that kind of stuff, and I could just work part-time when I got back to Florida. And that's how I did it. So I bought an Isuzu pickup to drive, and it was an 89, actually. And I saved $1,500, and I had met a guy in Central Florida, and his name was Curtis Miller. And he was racing in the sportsman class at Charlotte. They used to have a sportsman class there, and I think he had like a Buick or something. And I think that, you know, his sponsor had something to do with Bayliner boats or something like that. So he'd always have just enough money to get up here and race. And he wanted to be a driver, and I think he's a fireman in Charlotte now. Really nice guy, heck of a good dude. But he got me a part-time, like, contract labor gig at the Richard Petty Driving Experience back in like 1994. And that place had just kind of got started in. And, you know, Barry Graham he's this cat from this supercar dude from Australia, was part owner of it. And, you know, he was there all the time. And they had, you know, probably 15 cars, and they were just going to pretty much one track. So, you know, you just kind of wash cars and help them clean them up and service them and that kind of stuff, and then go to the track and put people in and out of them. So I did that for a few months for cash. And actually, I don't tell nobody this, but I actually lived in my truck for like the first 6 weeks I was here.
Damn.
And I didn't care because I just didn't care. I was like, man, this is where I need to be. So you'd kind of, you know, you'd finish up. If it was a night school, you know, you'd finish up and you'd leave. And I had the code to the gate. And so after everybody was gone, you know, I'd go get me something to eat, and I'd come back and I'd sleep in the parking lot in my truck behind the gate because you're on private property then. And there's a gate that closes, so there's no through traffic, no people driving around. And then I would set I had a wind up alarm clock, so there's no batteries, nothing, you just wind it up. So I'd wind that thing up, and like an hour and a half before anybody would get there, I'd wake up, I'd go inside, there were showers and stuff in there, and I'd get cleaned up, change my clothes, and I'd go get me something to eat at like AJ's down in Harrisburg or Chris's Pip Board. You know, those were the places that were down there in the mid-90s. And I'd go eat me some breakfast, and I'd drive through there like I'd been somewhere else. And I never told nobody I was doing that. So I did that for like right at 6 weeks. Then I ended up getting a single wide at Robbie Faggart's trailer park out in Concord. And I lived on the floor of that thing for a while, and I didn't care, dude. Like, I did not care. I didn't have no furniture, no nothing, and I just didn't care. I was like, this is what I wanted to do, and this is where I wanted to be. So, you know, I had all the will in the world for sure. And then I was, so I met Trent Owens through this deal. And his stepdad.
I'm familiar with that guy.
His stepdad's,
I think we all are.
his stepdad's Barry Dodson. And I've been watching Barry Dodson on TV for years. You know what I mean? He was one of the cats that I always paid attention to on race day. So, you know, Trent was one of the driving instructors at the school, and I met him. And then I met Barry, and I started fishing with Barry. And Barry was the crew chief of the Ultra Wheels truck that Mike Bliss was driving. It was number 2. It was like a Team ASE Ultra Wheels truck. Mm-hmm. It was a Ford. And so Trent had a late model, and we went somewhere like to Caraway or somewhere and tested it, and Barry went. And it was just me, Trent, and Barry. And we go up there, you know, and Barry wears us out. And then at the end of the test, you know, he's telling us how much he loves us and how proud of us he is, you know what I mean? Just giving us the tough love to make sure we learn the right way. And I every time I see him, I thank him for that kind of stuff. So me and Trent had went up there to get something, and Barry goes, why don't you just come work up here? I said, man, I don't know nothing. He's like, well, you know how to fish. I was like, you know, whatever. I said, I'm going to stay with Trent. You know, so I worked with Trent for a while. And in Racers Alley, where the Richard Petty driving experience was, they had the biggest building on the end. Well, WRC Race Cars, which Rodney Combs was part owner in, was down on the other end. And between there was bays that were rented out. So I think High Performance Drivetrain had one. And then there was a couple empty ones. Well, a couple of guys from Hendrick Motorsports started hanging bodies at night. And it was Tim Suggs and Greg Carpenter's who it was. And they ended up having a company called Aerodynamics that I eventually went to work for. So I didn't have nothing else to do. And it was wintertime, and there's no late model racing going on. And I started hanging out with these guys. And they were kind of a tough crowd to crack because they didn't want nobody around them. Like the doors were only opened up like a foot off the ground. They didn't want nobody to see in there, see what they were doing or nothing like that. So, you know, it pretty much started off, you know, you're going and picking up beer and cigarettes for people and this, that, and the other. And then you're in there sweeping up and you're cleaning up, you know. And then they're like, man, I like this cat. You know, I like this dude. And so basically Diamond Ridge was going to go cup racing. And Jeff Green was driving their cars, and they had the Cartoon Network. Mm-hmm. And it was a number 29 car, a cup car. And they were doing those cup car bodies and then their Busch car bodies. And then it just like started snowballing. Then Sabco wanted their stuff, and then MB2 Motorsports wanted their stuff, and it just got crazy. So you're doing the Die Hard truck for Darrell Waltrip. You're doing the Western Auto Parts America car for Darrell Waltrip. You're doing Phil Parsons' Busch car, which had channel lock on it back then that Gene Need was crew chiefing. Mm-hmm. I got some good stories about him, too, that I'll share with you.
Gene.
He was a prankster. Like, he wore me out.
He's a good dude.
Had a good time with him. And, you know, there was a lot of stuff, you know, a lot of stuff. So they hired me, and they like threw me right into the hot grease. And so I, you know, built parts, and then there was limited pieces that I would put on the car. So I would do like the A-post fillers and the dashes and the package trays, but I built all the rest of the parts. So I'd, you know, build the hoods, frame them, build the deck lids, frame them, put the roof flaps in the roof. And then if it was like a Speedway deck lid and there was some English wheel work or something, you would do that stuff too. And so that's what I meant about, you know, there's people that'll help you along the way. And if someone knows that you're willing to do the dirty work, they're a lot more apt to help you. If they see that you're really if people really see that you're trying to help yourself, they'll help you. And I've always done everything I could to help myself or help somebody else in them situations. So they get these contracts and they offer me a job. And I remember I made like $550 a week in 1995, and I thought I was a rich guy. I was like, man, I'm making, I think all my bills total back then, you know, with my rent out at Robbie Faggart's place and the power, and I paid insurance on my truck once a month, but I'm to my, you know, you got to come up with less than $400 to live a month. And so like one of my checks would pay for all that, and I could save 3 checks a month, you know, so then all you're buying is groceries after that and gas. And that Isuzu didn't burn nothing. So you just feel like the wealthiest guy around, like you're doing it. You're making a living doing what you wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And so I kept on rolling, and they got some more contracts, and they moved into a bigger building, and they were in Denver over in the Triangle Business Park. And I stayed there, for quite a while and learned quite a bit. And they had both worked for Ray Everham at Hendrick. They had both did a lot of stuff for the 24 car back then. And so Chad Canals had just recently left there and went to DEI. And he needed some hood pin bungs. He wanted to put the same kind of pin bar in a DEI car as a Hendrick car had. So he needed these 3/8 fine thread hood pin bungs. So Chad and I both lived in the same apartment complex in Charlotte called Summit Green. This is when I had moved to Charlotte. So I'm in the university area by where the Herlocker Burger was and the driving range, and then the par 3 golf course was in Summit Green, and that's where I was living. And Chad lived in there too, and I didn't know that. So, Chad stops by to pick these bungs up, and we end up getting this 2-hour conversation about racing and how we got there and all that. Well, 6 weeks later, I'm working at DEI. So 6 weeks later, I'm working at DEI, and me and Chad are, we're still close to this day. We're pretty doggone tight, and he was, and I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that don't like him. He's hardcore. He's hard to work for, but he wants his stuff right. Mm-hmm. And as far as I'm concerned, that's fair enough. Mm-hmm. And because his stuff has been right for so long, and he's been fortunate to have good people to do that for him, he's enjoyed a lot of success. And but I remember the Chad Canals that nobody knows about. I remember the guy that, Dale Earnhardt used to walk in that shop at nighttime, and his feet would be poked out from under a car. He'd be laying on a creeper, and Big E would come and grab him by his ankles and, sling him in circles on that creeper and just, wear him out. Just wear him out, And they had wrecked a few cars, and obviously, Big E and Andy Petrie were buddies, and Big E bought some of those Skull Bandit cars from Andy Petrie Racing. Mm-hmm. And Chad started, and like they were just supposed to paint them yellow and put Pennzoil decals on them and run them. And Chad's got the front ends cut off of them. He's got interior sheet metal cut out of them. Like it's just, he just went crazy on these things. But if somebody didn't want to help him, he didn't care. He did it himself. And that's what I recognized. And I'm like, you know what? That's exactly the road I'm going to go on. I'm going to be independent enough that if my imagination comes up with something, I'm not going to ever have to ask nobody to build it for me, because I'm going to build it myself, and I'm going to get the results myself, and I'm going to go do the test myself, and then that'll separate, the A-listers from the B-listers. That'll separate the people that truly want to do it from the people that just want to talk about doing it. And so that's the stuff that I drew from Canals in the early years. That's what I thought was so cool, that he could be so bold that he could cut anything off, cut anything out, and he didn't care, because he could TIG weld, and he could fabricate, and he could build, and he could think, and he could engineer. And I was like, that's where it's at, because if you can do that stuff, you're good to go. So, the DEI deal with him, Darrell Waltrip came and drove, and I think Philippe Lopez was the crew chief for a while, then Paul Andrews was, and then, Chad went and did his own thing. I think he went over and he did something with Bickle for a while, and Phil Hammer, and I think that was the Lucky Dog 321 car back then. And then he went to I think he was at Bickle's, and I think then he went over to, well, I guess that's where he was. He was at Bickle's. I guess that was where he went after DEI, and he was there for a while. And I was on the RAD program at DEI, which was Andy Petrie, Dale Earnhardt, Richard Childers had pooled funds together to hire an aerodynamic engineer, which the guy's name was Lewis Duncan. And so there was a group of us from all three teams. There was like 5 or 6 of us, and we all worked together. So we had built these adjustable cars that everything would move on. So the body would slide forward and aft, and it'd move left and right. And, you didn't have a body location rule back then. So you did all your measurements from the center to the rear axle. So you could be 59 inches or you could be 64 inches, whatever you wanted. So a speedway car was generally a lot more farther forward. So a speedway car would be like 62, 62 and a half. Then a downforce car would be like 60 and 5/8. So the farther forward you slid the body on the chassis, the longer and straighter the front fenders would get. So the transitions were nicer. So that's why you slid them forward on a speedway car, and then you would bring them back on a downforce car, because now the nose is closer to the front tires. So the fenders have to be more aggressive. They have to be more straighter. It's just movement, you know? So as you test all this stuff and you learn about it and you see these trends, then one test builds on the next one, and it builds on the next one, and it builds on the next one. So, you know, you keep a good notebook, and that's just kind of how it works out. So, you know, Chad had a lot of good ideas. Chad was on the side force thing way back then. And, so he is a dude that was truly ahead of his time. Like, no doubt about it. I give the guy all the credit in the world. I mean, like, he has knocked it out of the park, and, he's done good. But, so it's 1999. Chad's not there, and I am working on this rad program, and I ended up going down to, we called it the chicken shop, because we called it the low rent district at DEI. That's where the AC Delco Bush car was, and the 16 Napa Craftsman truck was back then. And
is that the one that's right here in town?
Yeah, right there. Okay. Right there, back there by the chicken houses. You know, the chassis dyno's outside. Yep. It was the one over there. You know, it was the low rent district, we called it, down there by the power lines. So anyway, I ended up meeting the Uris, and then I met Dale Jr., and then I started going out with them and having a good time with them, and, you know, and it was a lot of fun. And they were like, man, you just need to come work down here. So I ended up going and working down there, and they were a close-knit group of guys, and they didn't let just anybody come work in their shop. And we had some issues up in the big shop, and I was just like, I wasn't going to deal with it. So I just rolled my tools out the door, and Tony Jr. had happened to be up there getting some parts. He's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm coming to work in your shop. And he just started smiling because he knew what was going on. So we put my toolbox in the back of his truck, drive it down Cottle Creek Road to where you turn into the low rent district, and he tells out the window, he says, I got y'all a new helper. And they like want to know who it is. And it was me. And they're all smiling, yeah, you know. So we get my toolbox out, and I'll never forget Tony Uri Sr. looking me dead in the eyes, telling me that there was a chassis I could start on right there. Get it on the plate and start on it. And I had never done a car by myself. And I didn't do this car by myself. But it was one of those defining moments, because now it's like, you got to put up or shut up. This is it. This was the biggest sponsorship deal ever signed at the time with Budweiser. You got one of the biggest names in the sport coming. So now there's a fair amount of accountability. Mm-hmm. So I remember that. I remember being nervous, and I worked a lot of long days, and I worked with a guy named Dwayne Beaver, and I worked with a guy named Chris Stacy. And we built them first 5 cars, and went and tested them and took them to the wind tunnel, and the Uris were happy with them, and everything was going good. Well, I get a phone call one day, and it's Knaus. And he says, hey, man, what's up? I said, I'm good. He said, do you have a contract? I said, no. He said, well, do not sign one. He said, you tell me right now, you commit to me right now. I said, okay, I commit. He said, I can't tell you what it is, but you commit to me right now. Okay. Well, a couple of weeks later, I find out it's the Dodge deal. Okay. So here we go. So now I've got both my mentors at the same time. I have Ray Everham and Chad Knaus to pull from. And I'm like, this has got to be the greatest thing ever, because I wanted the development of a new car on my resume. So now I'm fixing to get that too. So now we've just developed the 2000 Monte Carlo, and now we're fixing to develop the 2001 Dodge Intrepid. So
I had a poster of that car on my wall.
Okay. So
when I was a kid.
Like, I can't even interject here, because this is like gold. Like, this isn't like gold. This is like Starship Martian Platinum falling from the sky, and it ended in this living room. Like,
yeah. So
holy shit.
Yeah. So stop interrupting.
Okay. So I commit to Knaus. And I don't tell anybody. I don't say a word to nobody about anything. And, I developed this friendship with Tony Uri Jr. and Tony Uri Sr. and, Brian Cram and John Quinn and, all these Two-Beer, all these cool cats that work down there, Dean and Little Nicky and, just all these great guys. And then I knew I was fixing to leave them. So when they were out at the championship banquet in California, when you came to work at DEI, you were on the Snap-on deal. You didn't bring anything in. You didn't take anything with you. And Randy Earnhardt actually did let me keep my black jacket that I still have today. It's in my closet, so I'll hang on to that. But there's, it was one of those deals where, when you've got a dream and you've got a vision and you feel like you got to take certain steps, it's hard to let go of some things. It really is. Now that was a tough move to make, but, I was looking farther down the road, and not that I thought that one was going to have less success than the other, but, me moving up here by myself with my own money, doing what I did to try to make it, I felt like that was the right thing for me to do to guarantee myself a long career. To do as much as you could, learn as much as you could, be as hands-on as you could, work with as much engineering as you could, And I was going to get that opportunity. I was going to get the opportunity to work with a lot more resources than I was going to have the other way. A lot more tunnel dates, a lot more engineering. I was actually going to start working with computational fluid dynamics. I was going to start seeing a lot of things that I never saw before, because, my thing is I just put brake fluid on the car and send them out, and then I'd watch where the drips went, and that's where I worked. You could see where there was low pressure airs. You could see where there was unattachment. You could see where there was attachment. And so I call it redneck engineering and redneck CFD, even though I'm not a redneck, but I used what I had, and brake fluid was thin enough that it would move, but it was thick enough that it wouldn't run down the car. Like, he could actually get going, and then once he got going and the air got attached, it would just push that stuff to where it was going. So you could see where it was attaching, where it was breaking off, how far down the back window the air was hanging on. And then as you made changes and you put new fluid on there, you would know if you made a good change or not, because the fluid would last longer. The streaks would be longer, or they'd be shorter. So it'd start teaching you things. You just start learning from that kind of stuff. So it's almost kind of smoky unit type of stuff, maybe. But, those are the guys I learned from. So for me, all those cats in the 50s and 60s and 70s, so you got dudes like Ed Pink in California, Ed Iskandarian, Vic Eldebrock, all those old school guys, they were the trendsetters, man. They're the ones that got it going. And then you had guys like Don the Snake Perdome, Tom the Mongoose McEwen, Big Daddy Don Garlitz, Gene Snow, Pat Foster, all these cats, that were racing. Then you had the late model batch, the Junior Hanleys, the Ed Howes. You had all those guys. Then you had the Wood brothers. You had Holman and Moody. You had these dudes that were, and to me, were the absolute greatest, because those dudes had all of their knowledge in their own head. So they built the things that transported their cars. They built the engines and stuff that were in their cars, and they built their cars, painted them, everything, machined the pieces that needed machined. They lightened the pieces. And these cats were old school. I mean, they're doing stuff with hole saws and torches and rock grinders, So it's way more work than what we do now. Mm-hmm. Even though there was less races, there's less guys. And if you were truly going to have a good car, you had to do it yourself. Because even in the Everham days, Bill Elliott used to come in and he would tease us about, we only raced 18 times, but we worked more hours than you guys do racing 30 times or 31 times, back then. Mm-hmm. So that was like the running joke with him. And so, the people that you look up to and that were your mentors that you paid attention to, you had a really, really stellar group to pay attention to and pull from. And that was a lot of my deals. So, as I was transitioning from DEI to Everham's, I remember meeting Ray Everham for the first time, and I had to go to his office, which was in the engine shop down on Weddington Road in Concord. And I remember walking in there, and I didn't, I dressed nice, and when I walked in his office, I didn't sit down, and he wasn't in there yet. His assistant Ann Eaton showed me in there, and he had a lot of cool things, on the walls, like, Vince Lombardi's speech and different little things like that. And I love that stuff because I love coaches, like Coach Joe Gibbs. I love that dude. I love his books. I dig the philosophies. I dig the teamwork and the, you get what you put into it. I love that stuff. Coaches are, I'm a big fan of coaches, whether they're, if it doesn't matter if it's Pee Wee football or if it's college football or if it's like meeting Ron Rivera from the Panthers. I think they got a cool job. I mean, they got a hard job, but I think their job is cool. But I think the coaches that mentor the elementary school, middle school, and high school kids, I think they probably got the best job of them all. They probably have the opportunity to make the most difference in those guys' lives. So, these team owners were my coaches. Whether I knew them or not, they were my coaches because I was paying attention to what they were doing. I was paying attention to how they carried themselves. I was paying attention to how nice their stuff was when it got to the racetrack. And I like that stuff. So I meet Ray Abraham for the first time, and we're talking, and and it was a very candid conversation. Like, I hit him with both barrels. I mean, I didn't hold nothing back. I said, I've heard all kind of bad stuff about you. You're this, you're that. And, he kind of pushed his chair back from his desk, and, he just let me know that nobody ever said that kind of stuff to his face, and that if they had a problem with him, they could just open up the record books. Like, well, there you go. All right. So I clicked with him. Right away. And so I leave there to go back to Mooresville, to what we call the Mooresville Mile, which is the drag strip park, was where he had rented 2 buildings from Derek Cope out there that we were actually building the first Intrepids in. So I ended up going to work out there, and he called Canals after I left his office. He said, "Can you control this guy?" Because I was a lot wilder back then. Like, I was wide open. I mean, I celebrated the fact that I was a race car builder for a living, and I had a good time. So Chad's like, "Yeah, don't worry, I can control him. Everything's good." So, that first year, the first 3 months of that first year in 2000, I would make the trip every day to Random in North Carolina to Petty Enterprises. And that's where the first Intrepids were built. The first Intrepid bodies were built in Random in Maurice Petty's shop. Mm-hmm. And so, by going up there, I ended up meeting Timmy and Richie Petty. And I let them know that, hey, man, I really like the history of the sport. I love this stuff, and I want to see some of it. Like, if you guys are gracious enough to let me see this stuff, I want to see it. He's like, all right, man. So like 2 or 3 days later, they come and get me, and they're like, come on. And they take me in all these barns, all these buildings out there, and I'm like looking at all these cars as they were raced that they put away. And so, like, you're looking at how the window nets were done, how the seats were mounted, what kind of materials they finished the inside of them with. And, like, where we have these 30-amp super fans that we use nowadays, I mean, these guys had, like, squirrel cage fans that, to move air around or to cool a rear end gear or whatever it was, they just used what they had, which at that time was cutting edge. So it was really neat to see, where they put air deflectors and the pictures of their cars with tufts of yarn all over them, and they would be at a proving ground, or they would be in the wind tunnel at Lockheed Martin in Marietta, Georgia, and they would drive a car up behind the other one, and then you could see through the windows, because where the control room is, you could look out the windows and look down on the cars. And so somebody could get in the other car and drive it up behind the one that's actually locked down to the test section floor that data's getting taken from. And you could watch the tufts of yarn do different things. You could watch the balance and the downforce change on the cars. You could watch the drag numbers change. And these guys were doing that stuff in the late 60s, early 70s. So, I thought that was pretty neat too. And so it's like it's just a science project that keeps evolving. And if you're really switched on and you're really into it, you never run out of things to do. You never run out of things to test. And so one of the other things about Ray that I took a lot from is I felt like I could remember everything, because I can do math in my head and all that kind of stuff. I don't ever need to write it down on paper. I can add and subtract, 4-digit numbers or whatever it is. And he told me one day, he said, I went to a meeting or something. He said, you must have a pretty damn good memory. And I was like, why? He said, because you don't write nothing down. He said, if you're going to run with me, he said, you better get a notebook. He said, don't come back to one of my meetings without a notebook. He said, I got plans for you. So I was like, all right. So we get going, and so we moved from Petty Enterprises, and now we're down in Mooresville full time, and we are developing a Dodge car, as well as now we're going to start building a couple of Ford Tauruses because Casey Atwood's coming to drive the 19 car. So he's going to do 3 races, and it was Richmond, Martinsville, and Homestead. And so, we've got 2 of these Intrepids done that they're taking testing and wind tunneling. And then, we ended up, everything got approved. And these are some of the cool things I got the opportunities from. I met a guy named Joe Miller that could carve whole cars out of clay up at the Daimler Chrysler Tech Center. Like, this guy was absolutely amazing. And I remember Ray telling me, he says, hey man, there's a clay guy going to come, and you're not going to have to make all this stuff out of metal. He's going to clay this stuff. And I was like, all right. He said, they're going to pick him up at the airport in the morning, and he's going to be here by, somewhere around lunchtime. I was like, all right. This dude, salt and pepper hair, tall, lean guy, comes in, glasses, cool as a cucumber, big old leather satchel of all these tools to carve clay with. Just amazing. Just amazing. And he had his scales and everything set up so he could pull straight lines, from, if he wanted to put a character line in this nose, it was 36 inches wide and 2 inches tall. He had a scale that we slid across this table that we had, and you could make this nose absolutely symmetrical, headlights, grill detail, just everything. And this guy was awesome. And so I'm still friends with him today. And this was back in 2000. So it's a long time ago. So I remember, we were getting ready to do our submission, and Ray had us go to the tunnel to do a practice run, because NASCAR gives you a set of numbers to hit, and you got to hit them, but you want to hit them, but knowing that you have stuff in the bank, so that once these templates are cut and released and they can't change their mind anymore, we know how to get 200 more pounds of downforce out of this car because we've already developed it. So now we're submitting it in a way that we can get templates cut that NASCAR gives you the okay on. But then it's like, when you leave there, you just got them. Okay? And we pulled it off. So Ray told me before we go to this test, he said, listen, you got 3 different noses to put on here. He said, and I need them to repeat within 5 pounds. Or 5 counts. It was like 5 counts. He said, this thing's got to repeat within 5 counts. I was like, well, all right. And we ended up getting them to repeat with in 3 or 4 pounds. Like, it was some crazy number. He couldn't believe it. He was happy. It was awesome. So needless to say, we had ended up with a pretty good set of templates out of the deal that nothing was really found out about till later, when the Dodge was pretty fast. And then, some of the Ford guys were complaining, and, that RT stood for really a Taurus and this, that, and the other. But, it was just part of it. But that was one of the biggest draws for me, was the fact that you would develop something that was better than somebody else's, and then that would force them to go and develop something. So we finish up the summer, we get our templates, we start going. They were redoing the building that was formerly Bill Elliott Racing up in Statesville at the airport. They were redoing that building. And we were going to race Casey Atwood for 3 races. So we built a Taurus for Chad. And that thing was, it was double throwdown. I want to say it qualified with over 500 pounds of tungsten in it. It was a lot, which you didn't have like all the TV rules and stuff back then. You didn't have to add all the things to your cars that you have to now. So everybody has the same thing. You had thinner windows and plastic bolts and, all kind of stuff, for qualifying, because you wouldn't have nothing in your car. I mean, you wouldn't have a full tank of fuel. You only have 1 battery in it, no fans on it, no NACA ducts in the windows, no braces, nothing. Like, it was the absolute minimum.
Plastic bolts?
Held the back window in. Yeah, they look like steel ones. As long as you touch them with a magnet, you were good. You know what I mean? They had the hex head in them and everything. So they were nylon. They weren't really plastic. They were nylon. Anyhow, and it was 1/8 inch thick, where rear glasses now are 3/16. So it was supposed to be 3/16, but it was only 1/8. And then the front windshield was supposed to be 1/4, and it was 3/16. So that was a weight savings there too, because those are pretty big pieces. So that's just how you did things. So we went to Richmond for our first race, and that's when you had 2 days of qualifying, and I think we ended up qualifying 25th, and we ended up finishing the race, and I think there was like 1 tire mark on one of the quarter panels. So we turned the car around, we went to Martinsville. He ran the whole Martinsville race, didn't tear nothing up. And then we were going to race Homestead, the last race of the year, so we were going to enter and test too. So Ray was always real big on getting drag out of a car. He wanted to drag out of it, and that was fine. So we go to work on this thing. He's happy, Chad's happy, and it's assembled. It's over there on the plate. And I was, he was very hands-on at that time, because he had done all of his financial securities tied up in this deal. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to make or break him. And he was building shocks. And he knew, and this was the stuff that really made me appreciate him. He knew when you went out for qualifying, he knew he knew what the elapsed time was from the time you left pit road until the time you were finished with your lap. So you're plug checking at the checker flag and how long it took you to coast. He knew exactly how long it was, probably within plus or minus 10 seconds. He knew exactly how long it was from the time you left pit road to make your qualifying lap till you came down and coasted. And you had minimum height rules back then. You had to be 51 on the roof. You had to be 36 inches on the right rear quarter panel. You had to be 35 inches on the left. So if you were low on any of them, they'd throw you out. Well, he had these really, he was really good with Penske shocks. And he had these really cool shocks that would hold the car down. So we're in the shop one day working, and he's in there. And he says, "Hey, man, come here for a minute. I need you to help me." And I go over there to the plate where he's working. He says, "Stand up here with me." And me and him both get on this car up where the radiator is, and we bounce this thing until the cross member hits the plate, and he hits a stopwatch. And he's waiting for this certain amount of time to go by. And when the time goes by, he checks the height on the roof. He said, "It's not quite fast enough yet." He said, "I'll be right back." Pulls them 2 front shocks off, goes out to the truck, makes a change, comes back in. We bounce that thing down on the plate again. Cross member hits the plate, and he did his shock deal. He valved his shocks to hold the front of that car down as long as it would hold it down. And he knew how much time he needed for that shock to let his car get back up to 51 inches at the roof. So that's how detailed this dude was. You know, he didn't just throw a set of shocks on the front. Like, he had this thing pinned down, staying down, but he had to know. He had to valve it in a way that he knew that it would come back up, or the roof height would come back to 51 inches, so your time wouldn't get disallowed. So we ended up having a really good qualifying run and led a lot of the race. And Casey Atwood just about won that race, and our teammate Bill Elliott beat us. Nope, I apologize. That was the next year. I think we ended up having a good run. I don't remember exactly where we finished in that first race because it was a Motorola car. Mm-hmm. But those were the things that I saw in him, and the commitment that I saw in him, and how hands-on he was. But then he understood the business side too, and I wanted to learn all that as well. And so that dude taught me a lot of stuff, and I had a really good career while we were there. And then 2001's coming. And I started working with Mike Ford and Kenny Francis and Barry Swift and Ruggiero and there was a couple other guys that were all on. I guess they were Dale Jarrett's championship road guys. Like, they were the 18 guys that came over to work with Ray. Mike Ford was a mechanic, but then he became a crew chief for that deal. I remember we worked like 81 straight days to get those cars ready to go qualify. And we went to Lockheed like 3 times, and we tested at Talladega twice, Daytona once, and then, you get down there and lo and behold, you sit on the pole. And that was pretty awesome. I remember, when it was Bill's turn to go out and qualify, we went out into the gift shop there, and it was on the TV. And Mike Joy was like, "And he's going to be fastest." And it was just like, I mean, it would almost tear you up because you had put so much into it. And the gratification for me for a job well done that's what did it for me, man. It was going out there against guys that are awesome at what they do. And you got Steve Berg that does the super speedway stuff at Hendrick. The guy is phenomenal. I love that dude and his attention to detail, and his reputation speaks for itself. He's won more Daytona 500s in the Cup Series than any other car builder. The dude's amazing. And Ricky Hartle over at Ganassi's, another one of them, old school, come from the Junior Johnson School of Racing. I mean, same deal. His stuff's won the 500. He's had poles down there. He's won at Talladega. And you're fortunate enough to work around guys like that, and you kind of just you get in sync with them. And it's a cool thing, and it's a cool thing when people like that you admire and you respect like your stuff too. They come to you, "Man, your stuff looks really nice. Your stuff was fast. It's really nice." So, those compliments go a long way, because it's a guy that's a lot like yourself. It's a blue collar dude that with want to and desire, and he's willing to do a little bit more than the next guy. And that's what truly I think made the sport, so special, is that, you got out of it what you put into it. And if you were willing to put in more 7-day weeks, or you were willing to take more risk, sometimes you get more of a reward, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, how do you follow that up?
I feel like any question that I ask is going to be a stupid question.
No, don't. No, they're not going to be stupid.
Oh, so okay. To dive into this wind tunnel stuff, when you were there, how long would you be there for a session?
I had sessions at Lockheed that Dodge was buying back then. They were 18 hours. They start at 6 o'clock in the morning and end at midnight.
So you'd just be sitting in there doing different things to the car, going out, reblowing it.
Well, you'd have more than one car. So you might take 3 cars with you. So you'd have a short track car, a 1.5 mile car, and a downforce car, and a super speedway car. Mm-hmm. And you'd have a run list for each one. So like each one would get, 5 hours, 6 hours, for the most part. You just divide it up. 6 hours would be the 18, 6 hours apiece, which isn't really that long on one car. Depending on how many heights your ride map has. And a lot of the times back then with the speedway stuff, you'd put actuators on them that you could control from the control room in the tunnel. Mm-hmm. And you could find the sweet spot on your speedway car where it made the least amount of drag. And so you would set all of your bump rubbers and bump stops to hold your car at that attitude the longest it possibly could. So that was one of the things you did too. And then one of the other cool things that you would do when you went to test, we didn't have GoPro cameras back then, but we had some makeshift stuff. And you would mount cameras under your car, and you watch springs and truck arms and front springs and how much the sidewall would travel in, so that when you were building sway bar arms and different things like that, there's all these details, but you needed to see things in real time at real speed with real forces. And I'm telling you what, when you see camera footage from underneath the car at corner entry at Michigan about 212 miles an hour, it'll blow your mind. It'll blow your mind how much that stuff's moving under there. And, it's amazing to me because when you think of the left-hand spindle, there's a fine thread nut over there that holds that bearing and hub on the car. And how that nut doesn't get stripped off there is beyond me. Because it's not very big. So it's pretty wild.
So how big of modifications could you do at the wind tunnel?
Well, what you do is you prep the car before you get there. So you've got the car prepped, you've got all your pieces built, you've got a run list, you've already been over your run list. So it's almost like you've practiced it. Like what tools you need, what order the pieces are going on in, and you're just executing a plan. No different than practicing for a football game or anything else. You're going there with a plan. You're not going there blind at all, because then you can't maximize the number of runs you get. Yeah. So there's no idle time. Like as soon as the fan's done, you'll crunch the data for a couple seconds. Hey, this looks like a good direction. Hey, this doesn't. Let's move on to this and not do any more of that, or let's put this back where it was. You might have some of that stuff, but you're not there wondering what you're going to do next. You already know.
So the session where you're taking brake fluid and all that stuff down there, that's not this session.
No, that would be like a track test. That would be a deal where we started going out to a 5-mile oval in Kingman, Arizona, right off of I-40. Right off of I-40, not far from Lake Havasu. We'd stay at the Holiday Inn at Lake Havasu, and I think it was like 45 minutes to Kingman, where this 5-mile oval is. Mm-hmm. So you think about how big Talladega is. It's 2.66 miles. And Talladega's big. Okay, well, Talladega fits inside this joint out there. You know what I mean? It's just got a guardrail around it, and it's in this valley. So it's 30 degrees when you wake up in the morning to go there, and it gets up to about 75 during the day, because it's the first week of November was a test, and the first week of December. So, it was cold until the sun came above the mountain on one side, and then it was nice and warm until it went down behind the mountain on the other side. So, and nothing to do with racing, but one of the coolest things I thought was you could see a whole freight train at this place because it was so flat. If you stood up on one of the hills, you could see the whole freight train. So it's like 6 inches, and you could see all the way down to the end of it, because that's how long and flat the valley was. You could see the whole thing. So it was a neat place to test. So you would run on the apron of this place, 195 miles an hour, never cracked the throttle. The turning radius is so long that you barely even turn the wheel. And
so the banking pretty much.
You don't even use the banking. You never used it. The turns are so long that it don't even scrub any speed for the most part. Like it's because it's a 5 mile oval. The place is huge. You just have to see it because you're used to walking into Charlotte and Daytona and Talladega. And this place is twice that size. Mm-hmm. So it was a neat place to go test. So that's where I would use the brake fluid and stuff. And then like Talladega and Daytona. Now there was a guy that worked for Dodge named Dale Frank, and he made this concoction that was black, and it was like, it had like graphite in it, and I want to say it had brake fluid in it. I'm not sure what it had in it. The guy never told, but you could put dots of it all over the place. You put them under the hood, wherever you wanted to, and it would stay there. Like it wouldn't move until the car started going, and then it would move, and then it would show you what you were looking for. So, you know, you just keep rolling, and you keep thinking, and you just keep doing it, you know, and then and cars keep evolving, you know, and I was fortunate enough to, as we got going, Casey Kane started driving the 9 car in 2006, and he had a lot of good runner-up finishes and was promising. Things were good, and then, you know, Ray made some changes, and he put our team with him, and we came out of the box at a test in Vegas and were really good, and then we won at Atlanta pretty quick, and then won pretty quick again at Texas, and then won again at Charlotte. You know, and then if we weren't winning, we were running top 10. You know, we were just top 5s, top 10s. We were running really, really good. And that was probably, I'd say, when I compare anything back to anything, 2006 was probably one of my favorite years of my career, just for the simple fact of the chemistry that we had with the owner, you know, our partners, our driver, our crew chief, our engineering, you know. Me and Kenny Francis talked every day. We talked after every race. Casey called me after every race, and we talked about everything. And he used to, you know, when the 9 car went and tested, he came and drove our car. Like we didn't have somebody else do it. Not saying that nobody else would do a good job, but we took that stuff that personal that he was like, if you guys are going testing at Kentucky and that's my car, he says, I'm coming to drive it. You know, and he'd ride on the plane with us and he'd come and drive it. And then, so, you know, we were doing a lot of air bleed stuff back then. And, you know, the aero different now. The aero thing now is so different because people are actually, when you have a no ride height rule, so your car's already on the ground. So there is no rolling over. The thing's stuck. It's down. It's there. It's where it's going to ride for the most part. You know, you're not traveling a front end 6 inches anymore. You're not, you know, that stuff's not happening anymore. It's already done. But when you had to do all that stuff, you know, all your lower control arm development, everything was built so that once you were traveling all the way down, your spring was compressed exactly square. And that's what coil bind was. Mm-hmm. And so that was your travel limiting device. You were using the spring for a travel limiting device back then. And, you know, we'd build those cars to our specs, and they go to the racetrack. The first run was left front coil bind. The second run was right front coil bind. Kenny would ask him, which one do you like? He'd pick one. They'd stay on it the rest of the weekend. They'd never change it. So, you know, we just had a lot of good stuff mapped out. You know, we took advantage of the rules big time. You know, we had a different valence height for every track we went to because of some places you traveled more than others, whether it was because of bumps or because of banking or whatever it was. So we always maximized our nose kick to what our valence drag-off heights were going to be. So if you needed your nose kick to be 1 5/8 at 5 inches, you know, I'd cut the nose so that it was maximized at 5 inches. If you needed a valence that was 7 inches off the ground because you're at Indy and this thing's planted, it's like the oil pans down on the ground. Mm-hmm. You know, you're borderline chucking teeth off the flywheel. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You know, you might present a car with a 7-inch high valence height for inspection, and that would mean that you would cut the nose and pull it out farther, you know, so to get your 1 5/8, because they would just put a framing square up to the edge of your valence, and they would measure to the character line on your nose. So that's how that rule was. So, you know, your valence could only be 1 5/8 out farther than where the character line of your nose was. So we never left nothing to caution. You know what I mean? Absolutely everything we could control. And so we weren't big on. We always tried to build the lightest car we could. And so, to eliminate air pressure underneath the car and get it into the cabin, like where our shock tower sheet metal was in the back of the car, behind the oil tank, above the rear end housing, we just put a seam there. And only put a couple of 3 welds on it. And then when the car was done and you're getting ready to go to racetrack, you take a Ziz wheel and you go through most of the weld, and then that piece will bust open on the racetrack. Well, now you got this big gaping hole that's letting air into the inside of the car, and it's going out the driver's window. So now there's, every bit of pressure you get out from underneath it, makes the car more efficient on the top side. Mm-hmm. So, and even when cars are around you and they're packing air under your car, they can't do near as much damage to you now because there's an exhaust route. You got a big gaping hole above your rear end housing that's 36 inches wide, and it's probably open in 2 or 3 inches in the center of that, and it's equalizing the pressure. And so we ended up running that like twice. We got a couple race ones with it, and we got spanked for it. And they didn't want people getting into having things break during the race for an aero advantage. So we got away with it twice, 1-2 races with it, Atlanta and Texas, I think it was, yeah. And then, you just kind of go along them lines, man. You tickle a car for sensitivity, and when you found them sensitivities, you did everything you could to exploit them. Mm-hmm. And probably one of my favorite stories for speedway racing is Todd Barrier. And he was Kevin Harvick's crew chief on the Goodwrench car. And we were at Talladega, and I want to say it was like 03. It was 02 or 03, but he had been suspended for something. So he'd been at the shop for like 6 weeks, which is like, he's just working on making stuff better, which was his job. And he did a good job. So I remember, nobody ran NACA ducts in their quarter windows. And he went and tested somewhere and put pressure taps in the right side of his spoiler. And he had found some super fans at the hobby store. And he had a right side quarter window with NACA ducts in it. But they couldn't be sucker ducks. So they were like ducks you would run at a road course. Well, he had these crazy high amp super fans that he had on a separate battery. And he put this, just this clear adhesive film over these holes. And as soon as Harvick goes out, he thumps the switch and these fans come off and they blow these little covers off these NACA ducts. So now you got this high pressure, high speed air coming out of this right side quarter window. Well, it's knocking the pressure off the right side of the spoiler. It's not letting the air hit it. So he goes out to proving grounds and tests stuff like this and perfects it. And I'll never forget him walking through the garage area with that window bag and I knew what that window was. I knew what it was, but you got to let that stuff go. Because you don't rat nobody out.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? You got to give a guy like that's your peer, the dude one-upped you, lick your wounds and go on and go build something better.
Tip the hat.
Yeah, you tip the hat at the guy. You don't rat him out, because I wanted to see what it was going to do too. And like Harvick goes out and just blisters this lap. And they're like having to get him to slow down on the second one or something. Something went on. But they're needless to say, they made a rule where you couldn't have no NACA ducts in your windows for qualifying anymore. So it's just things like that where you think outside the box and you have the work ethic, you have the know-how, you have the want to, and you put some stuff together like that, and you make a game with it. And all you have to do is thump a switch. I mean, that stuff's pretty cool. And all this stuff happens after you've been through inspection. So you're not worried about if your spoiler's lower than anybody else's, because you're fixing to just drill people. Like you were fixing to drill people with something they're not even looking for. So like you're not in a fight in the template line. You're not in a fight where the scales are. You're not in a fight with Big Andy or Big Brad about roll bar padding sticking out by the window net. Nothing. Like nothing. Dude rolls through and blisters people because he outthought them. And that right there, that's a big deal for me. The whole innovation thing, the whole science project part of it, and the fact that you're playing this game on a grand stage, and that makes it even more rewarding because it's nationally known.
So a lot of this stuff, to go off what you were saying, a lot of that topic is in the news right now, with taking wins away for cheating. What's your thoughts on that? NASCAR wants it in the hand. They want the best driver to win a race. They don't want the best group of thinkers to win a race. They want to say that we're making the rules close enough that it doesn't matter which cup team you work on. The tolerances are tight enough that whether you took them one way or the other, there's not enough of an advantage to make a difference. And there's probably not. But I can tell you this, the cars that are
running 40th to, 25th, those guys are working their rears off to get to the next race, get to the next race, get to the next race. And then, these other guys are working to make their stuff better because they're fixing a greenhouse down these cars, okay? The hood's coming off, the nose coming off, the rockers, the doors, the rear quarter panels, the tail, that stuff's going in the garbage because we already got new stuff. We got better stuff. We've got better deflection. We've got more side force. We've got better wheel opening lips. We've got better nose characters. We've already found another 100 pounds of downforce. Mm-hmm. So these guys are executing. They're executing the gains that their test team's been finding over the last month or so. You see what I mean? Whether it's doors that deflect in when you're in corner entry or post tech mods, just any little thing that where you're pushing the issue where there's not a template or not a nominal measurement. That's what people are working on perfecting because that's where the biggest gain is. Mm-hmm. You've maxed out your templates. You've taken all the tolerance. You've taken as much tolerance on the nominal numbers that you think that you can get away with. Mm-hmm. So now, the word on the street is they're not even going to template cars anymore. They're going to scan them next year. Yeah. So you either get a green light or a red light, and they'll show you like if you're out of bounds or whatever. To just speed the process up maybe because, guys are going to make excuses why a NASCAR grid don't fit their car when their grid at home did. You see where I'm going with this? Yeah. It fit at the shop. Yeah. And the reason it doesn't fit here is because you guys are hauling this grid up and down the road, bumping up and down on this trailer and this, that, and the other. Well, eventually that's why it's turning into what it's turning into now. It'll be a white light deal, and that stuff will be out of the equation. So really and truly, when you complain about a rule or you complain about a way that a rule's enforced or you complain about how it's checked, you're probably going to end up in a worse fight down the road because, it only lasts for so long. Yeah. And that's one of the errors that I was a part of was the Ford versus Chevy. I know that there was some stuff with Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski here over the last couple of days on Twitter and whatnot. But, I can remember Fatback McSwain and Mike Ford getting into it on pit road at a Daytona test because Fatback was like telling, the guys from NASCAR telling Darby and Buster and I can't do nothing with these Dodges. Y'all got to do something. Y'all got to do something. Y'all got to take some spoiler away or something. I can't do nothing with them. And Mike Ford was madder than hell. Telling Fatback to go to work. Y'all need to go to work. You know what I mean? So, I saw all that stuff. I saw the manufacturer battles. And that's what was cool about the manufacturers because it was an opportunity to build something better, to go and try to beat the guys the next year. And Toyota has done a super job of that. And, when you go to a test and TRD's there's like 50 dudes wearing black with TRD on them, in addition to whatever Toyota race team's there. Mm-hmm. So,
they're all in.
Yeah, well, the thing of it is people make the difference. No matter what nobody says, you got a lot of good people. They're going to beat a few good people up one side and down the other every time because you just can't do it. You'll run out of days and hours. You can't overcome that. It's just not going to happen. And you see, 78's good every week. The 11's good every week. The 18's good every week. And they're good because they work hard. They turn over every stone. They take advantage of every single thing and then some. Mm-hmm. They're doing their job. So I got nothing negative to say because I've been on that coin when Dodges were the best manufacturer out there and they were the fastest manufacturer out there. And, I remember one time, Kenny Francis was mad at Charlotte because there were so many people standing in the tech room waiting for his car to come through. I was like, man, you got to be proud of that. I said, that's a good thing. I said, when people are, he's like, they ought to be selling hot dogs and hamburgers in there. I said, well, it doesn't matter, dude. I said, there's not many times in your life when you're going to show up at a racetrack and you're going to win every practice, sit on the pole, lead the most laps and win the race. I said, enjoy it.
Yeah.
I said, enjoy it because you got to stop and smell the roses. And to me, that was a blessing. It's a blessing, man, for your peers to come over and tell you that your stuff looks nice and tell you that, tell your team that, things look nice and that, you're one of the cars to beat every week. I mean, that's when you're doing your job.
Hearing you talk right here, it's kind of breaking my heart that they're wanting to go to the composite bodies because I know that you guys are brilliant at what you guys do. So you're going to find a way. But it just seems like it takes a lot of that out, which is exactly what they're trying to do. You know, they don't want you in there with your hands, you know, molding that clay, so to speak. You know, like you said earlier, they're trying to take all that out. And hearing your passion for that and your interest in that, and then they're taking that away.
But you know what, though? I had my time, and I'm grateful for that. You know, I feel like that I lived in the greatest aerodynamic era in the Cup Series that there ever was, because you had the resources you had to work with, the equipment you had to work with. It was still all handmade. You know, my cup's full, dude. Like, I can't sit here and bash nothing. And I have seen the composite body for the Xfinity Series cars. I don't really think it's a bad thing for that series, or if the truck series ended up with them, or the K&N series already has it, because you know what, you can fix your car in a Walmart parking lot or a Target parking lot or wherever, Winn-Dixie, Albertsons, whatever. You can just pull into a parking lot and you can fix your car, you know, with minimal stuff, because you're just lining flanges and stuff up now. So if I mean, I see both sides of it, but it's like, you understand that things are going to evolve, and you understand that things are going to change, and it has gotten so out of control that you almost can't tech the cars anymore. Now, I'd say I don't think you'll see a composite car in the Cup Series for a while. I don't think
Really?
You'll see one for probably maybe 5 more years. I'd be real surprised if there's one before the next 5 years.
Wow.
So the next iteration of the Cup car will probably be,
I think it'd be the one after the next one, because I'm thinking there's going to be some, like, you know, Chevy's got a Camaro next year.
right?
Yeah.
You know, Ford's fixing to get a new one. You know, there's rumors that Dodge could be coming back in the sport. You know, there's rumors that there's another manufacturer that's looking. I don't know who that is. You know, it might be Honda. It might be, who knows? Volkswagen. Nobody knows. I think more manufacturers are good.
So do I.
Absolutely.
Because there's people in America that drive cars other than Toyotas, Chevrolets, Fords, and Dodges. You know, there's room.
I think it's because there's more factory backing for more people. So
Right.
those 50
More support.
TRD guys that are at the test, you're going to have 50 Nissan guys, VW guys,
Yeah, exactly.
on and on and on and on and on.
And think about the story racing past of like a Honda or a Nissan, and the stuff they were
Yeah.
doing in the 80s with their sports car stuff is insane.
Yeah. You know, I think that you take Hendrick Motorsports, for instance. I spent 4 years and like 3 months over there. So, you know, you work with Dale Jr., you work with Jimmy Johnson, you work with Jeff Gordon, you work with Mark Martin. You know, you work with some stellar guys. And I got a lot of rings over there in 4 years. And a lot of success. And, you know, it was a neat deal, and it was a different car, and it was a different time, but it was about just making the choice to say, hey, this is what they gave us. Let's make it better than the next guys. And there was a lot of days that we did that, and it was cool. But I think that, you know, there's so many smart people working on these cars now that NASCAR is a sanctioning body. I don't think they're able to overcome that if they don't do something like a composite car. Now then, big places like Gibbs and Hendrick and Penske, you know, they're always possibly going to have the funds to have maybe a secret room to do some things that people don't know about, you know, have some extra resources somebody don't know about, you know, some access to some, you know, different chemicals, different materials. You just don't never know, because it's all about winning. It's all about finding an edge. So there's really no telling where it could go. So basically what they did on the composite car was they have this hexagonal feature on the A post, the B post, and the C post, so you can't put any Bondo there. So, you know, there's things going on with some of the cars where you'll strategically change radiuses and character lines and stuff with Bondo because it's a stamped piece of sheet metal, and you're not going to be able to English wheel it or anything like that. But you know, you might find enough gains in adding Bondo and, you know, extending character lines or making more of a radius or making less of a radius over several linear inches that if you didn't do it, it might be a 100-pound loss in downforce. So where these, you get 9 pounds here and you get 13 pounds there and you get 24 pounds over here, and you can say, well, that ain't worth doing it. But the problem is when you find 10 to 15 of those things and all that stuff's in your car and you blow it against a car that's, box stock gold surface, that's when you see the difference. And not only are you going to see the difference there, but you're going to see the difference on the stopwatch at the racetrack, because the car with the most downforce is more than likely going to have the faster lap time.
Mm-hmm. Did they do a lot of the underneath stuff that we're doing nowadays? Were they playing, like, panning everything underneath back in that golden era?
No, because, and I'll just go back to 2006. Basically, what you had to do in 2006 is you had to raise stuff up until you couldn't get no breather element on the car anymore. So you'd have the engine guy saying, hey, I want a 4-inch breather element on this thing. So you guys can't just keep raising this motor. I want an inch of carb spacer and I want a 4-inch element. So you would literally put a mock-up motor in your car when you start putting the body on it. And you put the carburetor spacer, the airbox on it, and then when you mounted your hood and stuff, you took advantage of everything while you were good to your teammate that was building your engines and tuning your engines. So that's how you were able to set the heights on all your lower structure that ran underneath your engine, all your structure out to your lower control arms, the stuff that ran forward to your valence bar. All that stuff was in an area so that it wouldn't hit the track. Because, once you had the motor or the engine, once you had raised it up to where it was touching the hood, because you're trying to get your hood as low as you can too, especially in the front. So you're making a wedge out of your car. So then you would start playing with angles on the airbox, because the front of the hood's lower than the back of the hood. So then you started angling the airbox so that you could get everything in the most tight package you could and satisfy everybody at the same time. So there was really none of that stuff, because you had to just keep raising stuff up. So like when you came back from racetrack every week, if something was skinned up or ground on, either you had to raise it up or make it out of something thinner. Because you were going to get the same thing the next weekend, because you ran them on the ground. So there was nothing left to pan for the most part. I'm not saying that you couldn't go back now and build some of the trick tailpipes and the oil coolers and all the different things you do now underneath. The cross members that you make to hold tailpipes and stuff up, so nothing's sagging, nothing's dragging. Everything's up nice, tight package. Probably if you went back and did some of that stuff, like the way the rear end housings are bent for skew now and different things like that, but the thing of it is back then you could move body panels 3.5, 4 inches. You didn't have a 70 thousandths tolerance or 100 thousandths tolerance. You were moving things 3 to 4 inches, not the thickness of a quarter. Mm-hmm. So that was the difference. That's why, you raised things up to get clearance at the racetrack, but then you kept everything else as low CG or center of gravity as possible. And that's how you did it, because you didn't have these performance heights. You had a 51-inch roof height, and you had a 35 and a 36-inch rear quarter height. So it was like a different set of dogs. But
so that's a hell of a ratio when you're trying to get center of gravity and you're raising everything up, but the car is going to come down on the springs. Like figuring out, because everything that you do, like if you raise that motor up, it's going to affect the way it rolls in the corner, right? Unless it's on. Well,
it's not as much as you think. So basically, what we had is we had a set of actuators, and we had surface plates. So you could put actuators on a car, take the springs out of it, and you had numbers, and you could let the car down on a plate to what it would be at ride height attitude. And now you can get under it and look at everything. Because these plates are up off the ground, so they were made with 12-inch I-beams, so you could get underneath them. It's like a body plate. You could put actuators on it with the engine in it and everything, and then you let this thing down. So then the chassis builders can come over and look at their stuff. The engine guys can look at their stuff. The crew chiefs can look at it, and you're like, hey, we got problems here, or this worked out, or maybe we could go a little bit more there. So again, you're generating ideas as a group that you're eventually going to go test within the next couple of weeks. And then you're going to know for sure whether they work or not. And if they work, you put them in. If they don't, you do something different.
So how much difficult is it to go fast today than it was back then? Or is it more difficult?
I think it is more difficult today, because I don't think if you don't have the engineering group that Penske, Gibbs, TRD, Hendrick, and I don't know this for a fact, but I do know that Hendrick has a 7-post shaker rig. I've seen it. But I've heard that there's people there on the weekends while practice is going on, and they're actually running the setups that are in the cars. And then if there's an iteration of them, they'll run that setup and send that information to the racetrack. So I don't know, you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on that you don't even know. You think people are just like out on the lake and stuff, and there's actually people, they got a car on the 7-post rig, and they're shaking it and checking, running different shocks, running different springs, running different track bar heights, and they're telling these cats this is exactly what that does. Hey man, I need to know what this setup does and what that setup does, and there's people doing it. So I'm pretty sure that's happening in the other places too. Because here's what's happened. It's went to the last minute on getting a car in the truck. So you come back from the wind tunnel on Tuesday. Well, the car doesn't leave till Thursday, so we got all day Wednesday to take this thing apart, retrofit it. Now we'll put the wrap on it, and now we'll put it in the truck. So we'll do all our template stuff, and then we'll wrap it and put it in the truck. And then everything goes last minute now. It's just like that across the board because, everybody's got someone taking pictures at the racetrack. Everybody's got someone crunching data. Some people are just doing it at a higher level than others. You see what I mean? So with technology comes the rapid prototype machine, 3D printers. So now it's like, okay, so I'm with a team now. And someone's got a great idea for a set of tailpipes. Well, guess what? You draw them in CAD. You send that info to the 3D printer. The 3D printer makes a set of tailpipes for the scale model, which is a quarter scale car, so to speak. And you sand them off. You spray some primer on them. You put them in a FedEx box. You send them to Indy, and they put them on the scale model, and they tell you if they're any good or not. And if they're not any good, okay, you're out $10 worth of plastic. You've not bought any steel. You've not cut up nothing. You got no man hours. A machine has done this. So that's where the sport is. That's where it is.
That's pretty telling.
So there you go. I mean, and I'm not even giving you everything. I'm just giving you what's safe.
That's the scary part.
That's
so
the scary
there's
part.
more. I just can't tell you what it is.
Like my mind is blown right now.
I mean, there's been times this year when I've been to the wind tunnel 4 times in like 2 work weeks. So you know, 2 Aerodyne shifts, 2 wind shear shifts. It's because with Richard Petty Motorsports alliance with Roush Fenway, I got moved to work in their R&D program this year to kind of concentrate the efforts. And so me and my 20 wind tunnel dates went there. And our wind tunnel dates were usually always the day after theirs. So now there's 2 groups of us. So like next week, I'll be in Aerodyne on Thursday and the other group will be at wind shear on Friday. So we're getting the cars ready now.
Wow.
And there's a lot of 3D parts that are grown for these cars. Just so you know, there's the 3D printers are running right now.
So if you ever want to know where the $20 million sponsorship money goes that my man David comes up with, that's where it goes. It's the stuff that you don't see. It's the stuff that no one talks about. It's that stuff right there. That's the R&D. That's the prison engineering,
right,
as I call it.
And the thing of it is like, we had some test yesterday, and we didn't really bring much home from that. We did a lot of work, but we didn't find anything. So we beat the bushes a lot on some big places, and didn't get nothing out of it. And then there's been times you go there, and it's like you have a stellar day. So, the plain and simple fact of it is everything is happening in such depth, and so many people are working on so many different things that you're starting to run out of rocks to turn over. So what happens is when there's a rule change. So like this year, you have a different spoiler and you have a different splitter. Mm-hmm. Well, you have to go back through everything again because you've changed the pressure on top of the car, you've changed the pressure underneath the car, and you've changed the pressure on the side of the car. So you pretty much have to go back through all your run lists again to see if the sensitivities are the same, if they're more, if they're less. Did your balance shift forward? Did it shift rear? Is your side force crossover changed? Are you making more front side force at yaw? Are you making less? Can you open up a couple NACA ducts in your right rear quarter window to fix some of that so you don't have to mess with the chassis, to adjust the balance so you have exactly what you had last year? There's a lot of things to look at. There's a lot of variables, and it's really, really amazing, what it takes this day and time to do that.
And Chad's really been the best at that.
He's good at it.
At adapting to the new stuff.
He has done really well. But again, he's willing to do a lot more than a lot of other guys. No disrespect to the other guys, but he's known to outwork and outthink people. And I mean, Cole Purn and those cats are giving him run for his money right now, no doubt about it. Pete Rondeau and Johnny Roten and Johnny Dehart and Seth Poling and all those guys out there at Furniture Row, they're doing a heck of a job, and they're bringing it every single week. We were talking about Martin Truex Jr. earlier, and I was telling you about the first night that I met him. They had been at a test in Richmond, and Dale Jr. had took him there, and it was a Busch car back then, and so Dale Jr. was out there, and he kept telling him to loosen the car up, and he got it so loose that he about couldn't drive it. And Martin got in the car and went faster than he did, and he said, "That's my driver." So that's kind of how that deal worked out. It's so it's the best I understand. That's how it worked out. That's how he got really big on Martin, was when Martin drove a loose race car and went faster than he did. So you think about it. You think about the lives that dude's changed. Brad Keselowski, T.J. Majors, Martin Truex Jr. Alex Bowman. Yeah. Just you get lined up with this guy, and you have that one life-changing moment, and bam, look what happens.
Mm-hmm. And the thing about that is all those guys, Brad's a cup champion.
Got Finch's win at Talladega.
Yeah, Martin's getting ready to win the championship if everything works out the way it's going to.
That's how you got a Ryan Truex.
Yeah, that's how you got all of it. I mean, that's how Alex was able to jump in and almost win Phoenix last year.
And that's what I saw this year that I've paid the most attention to, is when Ryan Blaney won that race at Pocono. I was like, this right here is probably going to be a game changer, because you think of all these young cats that are waiting. So you got Kyle Benjamin, you got Christopher Bell, you got Daniel Hemrick, you got Cole Custer,
Reddick.
There's a who was the cat that won Iowa?
Oh yeah, Ryan Preece.
Preece. So you got a ton of young dudes coming that want to do this for a living. Not saying that the guys that are racing now don't want to do it, but there's a youth movement coming, and there's going to be a big demographic shift here in the next couple of 3 years. I say
way cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but the wolf coming up the mountain's hungrier than the wolf that's standing on top of the mountain.
Yeah,
and that's my thoughts exactly.
That's across the board,
Timmy, you got to come back, man. I feel like we've
no. Let's not cut this off.
No, I'm just saying in general.
Oh, okay.
This is just scratching the surface here.
It's just it's been an amazing ride. You figure I started cup racing in 1995, and it's 2017. 2017's winding down, and there's times that I'm just sitting out on my balcony, and I might be drinking an Old Milwaukee Light or a Budweiser or something, and I'm partial to the Old Milwaukee Lights because I buy them every once in a while because I can get them right here in Mooresville at Lowe's Foods. And that's what my uncle drank at his shop. Whenever they had beers, he had Old Milwaukee Lights. So, it's kind of like if I get like this weekend, I was kind of in a reminiscent state of mind, and I was just thinking about the last 20 years and thinking what I'm hoping the next 20 years is, and, how to plot that and how to roll with it. And I'm like, man, it's been one hell of a ride. It's been a damn good time, because you got all these friends that turn into family, and there's you could be at the racetrack and you could be broke down, have a flat tire. It's like nothing's impossible. It's like the guys in NASCAR. I mean, it should be borderline illegal. I mean, there's so much brain power in our sport. There's so many smart people in our sport. There's so many good people in our sport. It's I don't know of nothing that we probably couldn't build if enough of us wanted to. It's pretty amazing, the resources that we use to make cars go faster that you could maybe start applying to everyday life.
Oh yeah.
And you've learned all this stuff for free. Like, you didn't have to go to school to get it. You've just learned it over time. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a really good gift. Like, I'm very, very thankful for that I've been able to work with engineers and ask questions and, learn things about adhesives and just, different materials and how heat affects them. And yeah, it's, there's so much that you can apply to the outside world from this. And I've never been in the military, but I would almost, I think it'd be a safe bet to say that, when guys come out of the military, they're probably a lot farther advanced than most people they're walking around in.
Oh yeah.
Whether
Absolutely.
it's how to handle a violent situation or how to work on a jet. You don't never know. There's a lot of facets in that area too.
Mm-hmm. Back to so right before they went to the COT, those cars, they called it the Twisted Sister.
Oh, those things are amazing. God, I still love those cars. I still, and I started kind of scrapbooking on my laptop, and I started, going back into the archives and finding all these car bodies that I had a hand in. And so I've got a lot of pictures, that were, 9x13s or whatever those things are, that you would get from Showbot. You'd buy them, and then I've got a bunch of stuff that I find off motorsport.com, and you just go back and comb through the archives and look at all of them. And the cool thing about that is when you put pictures of cars, just say from 1995 to 2006, you can see the evolution happening. You can see the cars get closer to the ground. You can see the noses get lower to the ground. You can see the tails get higher. You can see all the things that you're doing to make side force on the right side. So you're making quarter panels longer. You're closing wheel openings up. You're removing body locations. You see all that stuff progressing and transpiring. Mm-hmm. You see it evolving, and it's neat to look at all that stuff. I mean, I still have some Winston Cup scenes from back in 1995.
Wow.
But the thing is, to the layman, when you looked at those cars, they still looked straight. It was only once you got to look at it that the right side was straight. The left side was kicked back.
Well, the layman guy is going to think somebody made a mistake, and then a guy like me is going to be like, I got to get some more of that because that was good on the watch. You know what I mean? And that's what NASCAR didn't like about it. NASCAR didn't like the fact that, they want to, NASCAR wants a car to look symmetrical. And when they did the Car of Tomorrow, they built a fair amount of that into it. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the rear of the car we race now, you can see that the tail's farther to the right.
Yeah.
So that stuff was built in there. But it's, again, the teams were smaller in 1995. It's just, as the teams were smaller, so your crew chief usually made all those. Well, he probably did make all the decisions on what pieces you built to go track test or what you took to the wind tunnel or that kind of thing. But I want to say that there's always a trend. So you think about 60s and 70s. It was all about big horsepower. You have more motor than you knew what to do with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What's the quote? Aerodynamics is for people that can't build engines.
Whatever the case may be, but you
I feel like you're going to hit me when I said that.
No, but you got a full grown 426 Hemi in your race car,
Screaming.
and they're only 358 inches now with one carburetor on them. Or now they're fuel injected, but back then they had the just the typical 4-barrel style double pumper Holly. Now things are fuel injected, but back then it was about bringing something better than the next guy did, and they did a good job doing that. But it's those cars were a lot higher off the ground. If you look at the pictures of them, they were way higher off the ground. They weren't, the tires weren't as good. And that's the thing, and as we've lost drivers, over the years, and it was just a simple case of, the cars evolved faster than the safety equipment did. And we've seen this stuff happen in collegiate football as well as NFL football. And you look at the helmets now, they have like this little breakaway thing on top of them. Mm-hmm. You got guys running 4-second 40-yard dashes, and they probably weigh 275, 280 pounds. I mean,
or more.
People are, they're just, people are machines now. Mm-hmm. Like the training and the technology and the food you supplement people with and just help them get stronger in the training. And, they did the same thing. They overcame their safety equipment's ability to protect them.
Mm-hmm. Everything's so specialized now.
Yeah. And that's just what evolution does. I mean, when you keep going and you keep going and you keep going, I read this philosophy thing one time. I had it was this Chinese philosopher, and I think his name was Bumbalana, something along those lines. And his saying was, and this has stuck with me forever. And I want to say I probably found this back in like 2000 or 2001, but it basically said that the further you progress, the fewer teachings there are. The true path is really no path. So when you first start trying to learn something, you think about the shape of a triangle, and you're at the bottom of the triangle, it's the widest. So you have all these resources. Well, as you keep climbing the ladder, the guys in upper echelon just keep getting less and less and less and less until finally you're to the point where you got to make your own decisions, because the true path is really no path. It's the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Because you've progressed to a point where there's, you're not going to find it in an encyclopedia anymore. You're not going to be able to Google it anymore because you're going to be the guy that does it, and that's how it's going to end up on Google. You see what I mean?
Yeah. So is this, when you're coming up with these new things and you're trying to, figure out, move this here, move that there, is it something that you're constantly thinking about it all day long and something just pops into your head?
Well, it usually starts at the racetrack. So if the driver is complaining about something, I don't have as much front grip as I need, or I don't have as much rear grip as I need, or I feel like I need some more rear side force. So what you'll do is you'll have a meeting as a group. So you'll have engineering, you have aero engineers, you have structural engineers, you'll have fabricators, guys that build, and everybody will sit down and will generate ideas from the problem. So it's the same scientific method that you learned in 7th grade. Identify a problem, gather as much facts and information you can about the problem, come up with an idea to test these things and see if you can find a solution to it. And if you can, then how do you implement it? So that's basically what happens is, so you'll brainstorm, you generate ideas. A lot of times it's around a car that's on a surface plate with a grid that's sitting on there, so you can look at how you're taking tolerances, where this is, where that is. How much is this part moved in front of this one, or how much is this part moved out from behind this one? How much can I take? How much do I think I can get away with? What's it worth? And then you rank those ideas, most important to least important, and that's how you get your test list generated. And once the test list is generated, then you'll be assigned, some of the duties on there, and you'll build the parts, and people come by and look at them and okay them, and no, I want more of this, or no, I don't want that much of that. And then when everybody's happy, you got a deadline to meet, number one, so you got to make everybody happy by the deadline because the car's got to leave by 3 o'clock the day before the tunnel test, if it's going to Aerodynamic in Mooresville. So it's like today, for instance, There's 2 cars getting worked on right now. One's going to enter to Aerodynamic next Thursday. One's going to Windshear on Friday. And I'm working on the car that's going to Aerodynamic. So Kurt Romberg, that's our aero engineer, came down with the test list, and we went through it. And I make my little notes beside all his things so that I know. So now because I'm kindergarten like that. I like pictures and illustrations and all that kind of stuff because I'm a visual guy. And so you make sure that your circles are overlapping. It's just a figure of speech that I use to say that we're understanding each other, and I got your vision. I've got your mental picture is in my head now. I know what you're asking for. And that's how you roll with it.
Okay. Now say that you catch wind of X team doing something different. How much do you take that into account? Do you reverse engineer, or do you just say, okay, they're doing something different? They got there a different way. We can't put that on our car right now because it's not going to work.
Well, this is what I do. So I have Spectrum cable, and I record every practice, every qualifying session, and every race. And I sit in front of the TV with my notepad after my little boy goes to sleep. He's 5, so once he goes to sleep, I take a couple hours, an hour, something like that, and I'll hit my DVR button, and I'll start going through the practices. And every time there's an in-car camera shot or a good camera shot, or the camera guy's walking through the garage area and he's, somebody's got a problem and he runs his camera right up in the right rear, the left rear, or whatever, I can pause that, I can look at it, and I can make notes about it. Same thing with the in-car camera stuff. I'm paying attention to where every single brace is, what it's hooked to, what it's made out of, what color it is it blocked off, does it have a hole in it? If it has a hole in it, where is it and how big is it? So I'm making all my notes. And then that's how I stay current with the people that I'm racing against and try to keep the playing field as even as I can, because when I go to the racetrack, I can't get close to nothing because people know who I am. And they know if you're there and you're working on something, probably something shady is going on. So they're going to be watching you anyway. So, I'd be a fool to touch something at the racetrack because it's going to draw attention to it.
So speaking of watching TV and watching the practices and stuff like that, if you've been on Reddit, if you're familiar with Reddit, there was someone on Reddit that caught something on a post race. Some guys doing some stuff down on pit road. I mean, I know that stuff goes on all the time. What was the effect that was doing, if you can say?
Well, basically, because
I mean, you're talking.
Let's just say a spoiler blade was strategically decaled to peel in a certain way that it may or it may not have had an aerodynamic gain. So I myself have not tested this. I mean, if I've got an extra run to burn next week, I might do it just to see. And then it might have been a simple mistake. It might have been a rookie decal guy. You don't know. So you got to kind of look at it from all facets. That's the due diligence
that they're saying that they got to go through and make sure there wasn't any malicious intent or whatever.
Yeah. So, it's hard to say. I'm for stuff like that because you got to get an advantage any way you can get it. And if you got to strategically stack a decal so it peels up a certain way that makes a certain amount of downforce, you know what? Decals don't weigh much. And so I like that. I like holes in parts and I like decals that make downforce. So, again, I commend them. Now then, you got to understand you're on camera and you're not going to hide from much there. So you got to be slick. And, you need a really big crowd of people around your car before you start touching it. If you're going to touch it.
Yeah, what they say, the safest place to hide is in a crowd.
That's right. So you need a mob scene around your car. And I know a couple of guys that are pretty good about getting a little here and there when there's a big crowd around their car.
I always heard the story. You always get the littlest guy with the biggest cart to make a big crash or a big bang or something like that, and everyone looks up.
Well, that's the other thing, too, is like your competitors are paying attention to you. Everybody's paying attention to everybody.
Yeah.
So it might, it's either going to be a camera or it's going to be your competitor's eyes.
Yeah.
There is no safe place. So you have got to play the game really, really well. If you're gonna pull some trickery, you got to have it thought out and you got to play the game really, really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're a fan listening to this and you come into the garage, say that you get a pass, and you're walking around and you're having the time of your life because you're in the NASCAR garage and you're and you're snapping pictures everywhere, don't be surprised if someone like Timmy over here comes up and yells at you and says, "Stop taking pictures of my car." It's nothing personal against you. It's not that they don't want you taking pictures of their car. It's you're literally taking a picture of their car that can be seen at a later date by anyone, especially if you post on social media now.
Dude, you would not believe the sites that I comb of PR people that take pictures of cars with no tires and wheels on them. I'm all over it. So I'm one of those guys that's up at night and I call it doing my homework. And you see a lot of good stuff that people just innocently post that they probably didn't run by the crew chiefs or something like that before they did it. So, you got to do what you got to do, man.
I remember taking pictures off of social media posts on certain cars because a crew chief came and said, "You see what's going on there? Yeah, if you can see that, everybody else can. So I'm going to need you to..."
Well, cars in the shop are one thing because they're up on jack stands. You usually don't have tires and wheels on them. Cars at the racetrack, I mean, you get what you get there. I mean, you got to work. You got, those dudes don't have a whole bunch of time. So whatever's going to happen there is going to happen. But,
but
you can't control what happens in your own shop.
Yeah, but at the racetrack, you'll leave wheels up in the wheel wells. You'll keep the hood closed. You'll do this, that, and the other thing.
Because here's my thing. You have to take them tires off at some point. Yeah. And a car that's running good is going to get TV coverage. So I see a lot of stuff underneath cars because those cats got to change. They got to put their scale tires back on.
Yeah.
So they have to take the ones they just ran off because they got to put their scale tires on to scale it. They don't scale it with the cars they just ran on with the tires they just ran on the racetrack. So, there's times that cameraman gets you a good shot. And the fact that you got a TV with a remote control that's got a pause button and you can rewind it or fast forward it, you can just stop it and take all the notes you want to as long as you want to. I've even taken pictures of the TV with my phone. They were pulling the engine out of Harvick's car one time and the in-car camera was left on. So there's no radiator in the ductwork. So I got to see what the inside of his ductwork looked like and I got to see all their nose bars. Because the hood was up and I could see through where the center cowl is. You could see through the hole there. Uh-huh. And I got that picture in my phone.
And you're not the only guy doing this, I hope.
Probably not. But
I
mean, I'm covering my rear. You know what I mean? I'm doing everything I can to be an asset to where I'm at.
Oh, man. Just seeing, whenever there's a commercial filmed at the shop or, they're doing TV this, TV that, all the hoods come down. If a car's up on jack stands, it goes down to the ground, like it's like when you see it on TV, that's not how the shop looks normally. Like it's car covers are put on cars, like everything's so secret, which is why we've never really had like a quote, quote, reality show, like a Orange County Choppers, or anything like that, because everything's so secretive. I mean, you can't have those cameras floating around the shop and having, that's really what the sport needs is a show like that, but you literally can't do it because...
You have to stage it with show cars.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point because, I was fortunate enough to meet some really cool bike builders. Back in like 2003, I met Billy Lane from Choppers Inc. Mm-hmm. And he's always been one of my favorite bike builders, and he was friends with Ray Abraham, one of my previous owners. And so, he spent some time with us at the track, and you get to talk and this, that, and the other, and I was a fan of his work, but at the same time now he's a fan of my work because he's like, how big are those pieces? And I tell him, he's like, oh my God, he's like, how do you do that? He's like, how big is the side on that car? I said, well, it's from the center of the front tire to the center of the rear tire. He's like, how do you even hold on to that? Because he's been making gas tanks, so like pieces aren't that big. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're talking about, a piece that goes in an 8-foot roller, and it just blows them away that there's not a ripple in it, and it's one piece. And, it just, he was as much a fan of mine as I was of his. Mm-hmm. Once we met and got to talking, and then he got to look and see, where the seams were, because he was really interested on how big the pieces were and how long it took to build them. And, what kind of equipment did you use? Planishing hammers, Eckeled shrinker stretchers. I've got some wood mallets that you use on a sandbag. There's all kind of different ways to do it. And it's the same thing when you meet musicians at the racetrack. So you might meet, a guitar player from Gary Allen's country band, or you might meet a drummer from somebody else or whatever, and then you start talking to them and you make friends with them, just like Ricky Rackman from LA. Mm-hmm. He's in the garage area every now and then, and you make friends with guys like that, and then he's bringing people around. And, the thing about it is it's art. And as far as I'm concerned, art don't have any boundaries. So whether you're a metal shaper or you're making music or you're building furniture or whatever you're doing, I love creative outlets. I think they're incredible. I love abstract art. When you're creating and building and stuff, I just really, really dig that. And, the custom motorcycle deal, me and some friends of mine, we built me a bike, and, when you get on the road the first time on something like that, it's gratifying because it's not something you bought in a store. It's got a bunch of hand-built parts on it, and the thing of it is like with my bike, most of the parts that are on it, you got out of the scrap bin at work because it was stuff that people were going to throw away, and you use it for a piece, or you machine it, or you turn it down, or you build a gas tank out of it, or, that's what I love about my bike. I mean, it was built out of the scrap bin at Everham Motorsports, Hendrick Motorsports. I mean, it was, you know what I mean? And that's what's cool about it. So that's one of the running jokes with me, Ray. He's like, well, I guess that's part of my bike too then. You know what I mean? I was like, well, I guess if you want to ride it, you ride it. But, so it's just, it's really neat to do something, I have no disrespect towards anybody and what they want to do for a living, but, I wanted to do something that was unconventional. I mean, I'm an unconventional guy, and I just didn't want to wake up every day and have an office job or something like that. I wanted to travel and, race and have a good time. And, mm-hmm. There's just a lot of things that I wanted to experience, and I didn't, no disrespect to the Leave It to Beaver, family lifestyle. No disrespect to that at all, but I just had too much of just an ambitious, adventurous, personality type, mm-hmm. for lack of a better term. I just wanted to do something cool and exciting, and I wanted to do stuff that everybody couldn't do. I wanted to do something special.
That's the one thing that everyone that we've had on so far has that same thing in common. Wanting to do something different, wanting to do something cool, wanted to be a part of something, wanted to travel. and racing is that. Racing gave that to me. Racing gave that to him.
But the part of it for me, it's not that I don't think that someone that builds a house isn't an artist or nothing like that. It's the fact that you are evolving against a set of rules pretty much on a weekly basis. That was the draw for me. It's like, can you outthink your competition in the same amount of time?
Yeah, because
can you one up this guy? Can you one up this guy by next Friday when you come back to Charlotte for the 600? He got you for the All-Star race. Okay, can you one up him for the 600, and then can you one up him the next week at Dover? You see what I mean? It's a constant, I call pissing match. You're in a pissing match with some really good dudes, but everybody's in the same match. Everybody's coming to the racetrack or sending cars to the racetrack. Everybody's in the same fight, so to speak. So that's where the difference is. It's not that you're any less of a guy because you don't build race cars. That's not what I'm getting at. It's the fact that there's a competitive thing where some guys just have that. Some guys just want to play that game week in and week out, and then there's some guys that they want to go, they want to do their work, and when the whistle blows, they leave and they go home and they do their thing. And a lot of times I kept working after most of the people left, and that's how you kept things a secret, and your crew chief would know about them, your owner would know about them, your driver would know about them, but there was just some things that if you knew they were a game, and you knew that there was going to be a clutch performance. We won that Rock and Roll 400 at Richmond with Jeremy Mayfield in 2004, and that was our only shot to get into the chase that year. And we had to finish third or better. No matter what anybody else did, we had to finish third or better. And I think we qualified third, and we led the most laps, and we won the race. And I remember that car from its infancy. I remember when that thing was a bare chassis, and we were punching all the holes and all the sheet metal and lightening everything up and, putting this double trick light throw downforce body on it, and they went and tested it. And, Kenny Francis told me when they came back from the test, he's like, man, this thing runs out of gas before it runs out of tires, which means that it just keeps turning. It has forward drive the whole time. It keeps turning, it's good. So, we loved on it some more. We put the candy on it, decaled her up, sent her back, and lo and behold, we won the race that night. And that was one of those deals where I've always taken this business serious enough that, if I was on a team that didn't make the chase, I felt like I didn't deserve my job there. So I've always put that kind of pressure on myself. So that night was like the last hope. That was like it. And there was people having, parties where they were, the projector deals outside and, we're going to have it on the side of the house. And I wouldn't go nowhere. I stayed home and I watched that race at home by myself because I couldn't, I was that, I don't know. I was just that connected to it that it was like it was a make or break type of thing. And lo and behold, we won the race, but it's just moments like that. If I wouldn't have taken the chance on moving up here and starting from nothing and just going after it, I would never experience that. And it was like when Tony Eury Jr. and Dale Earnhardt Jr. asked me in 2007 to come to HMS with them. And I said, and I accepted their offer and I went, and we got there New Year's Day, got to work, got going, we went down and tested. We were fast at the test and, we go down there for the Bud shootout and we had all kind of problems getting through tech and, we finally got through and got out on the line and all the fans are at the fence and they're yelling at the tech guys and telling them to leave us alone and you're picking on them and stop and I remember there's this one lady telling Tony Jr. She's like, "Don't you take that crap from them, Tony Jr. Don't you do it? Don't you take that from them?"
I love that.
These people are raising hell. So we're cutting pieces of roll bar padding off at the window net and all that. And I just took all that stuff over and started giving it to the fans. I started sticking it through the fence and giving it to them. Everything that we took off that they didn't like, I gave it away. And Tony Jr.'s mad, and he's telling Big Brad and Big Andy, he's like, "I'm not doing nothing. I'm not messing with the window net. Y'all are crazy. It ain't happening." And they're like, well, we're going to call Darby down here. He's like, well, get him down here. You know what I mean? So it just, and we're holding other cars up. And more people, and this is the fan zone in Daytona, so these people have been power drinking for hours. So they're in no mood for, America's favorite son's car is not getting through tech for something that's not relevant for the most part. And the frustration's coming, the cuss words are coming out. People are like wound up about this. So lo and behold, we give them their pieces of roll bar padding back. We gave all the parts to the fans and stuff. And I remember telling them, I said, we're going to win this thing tonight. We're going to win it. And we damn sure won it. And it was an awesome feeling, and I have that Winston Cup scene too in those pictures. But it's those moments, man, that, it's just, and when I see a team, win a clutch football game or win a Super Bowl or win a golf match, what that guy feels because you've been there before. Those golfers are still hitting they're still hitting 300 or 400 balls a day. Whether they're playing or not, they're still working on their short game. They're still working on their chip game. They're still working on their sand trap game. Muscle memory. They got psychologists talking to them. They've got coaches. It never stops, and that's the same way cup racing is. It never stops.
I've always heard this rumor. I've never had it confirmed about taking and having your backup car be the car that you want to run. And you unload the primary and you rough it up a little bit in the wall and you go to your backup and then you get the backup to go easily through tech.
That I'm not saying that that's never happened. I've never been a part of anything like that. Again, like Ray Abraham's philosophy was you need to have 2 primaries in that truck every week and you have another primary on the floor in the shop ready to come if you got to have it. And that's how we rolled. There was 3 cars ready every single week that were prepared equally. There was no, well, I got to put crush panels in this one or this one don't fit the templates right. Every week when Chris Sweeney left with them cars, you had 2 primaries in the truck. We didn't have one that we called a backup car. We just had one that we started with first. But they were both equally as prepared, equally as good, equally as tricked out. And then there's one on the shop floor at home. There was a 1.5 mile of them that was that way, and there was a short track one that was that way. And we always had an extra speedway car that was totally put together. Motor, everything. Like you could literally, it was wiped off under a cover if you had to have that thing.
It was 8 hours from being down to Daytona.
Yeah. So that's just how we did things. I mean, every team probably doesn't have the opportunity to do that. And again, no disrespect to them. But if there's a lot of ways to control a lot of your luck. And if you're not prepared, you can't help yourself at all. So you have to have the discipline to put the extra effort in so that you have something if you need it.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have you gone to the track, had that perfect car, and not won the race?
There's more times than not.
Yeah.
But you don't never use that for an excuse. You put the silver bullets in the 44 Magnum every single week. You don't never shoot cowboy rounds with it. Silver bullets. No cowboy rounds. No brass. Silver. You know what I mean? So It's like there's no need to go. If you're going to win and you left some on the table, shame on you. That's the mentality that you got to have.
Yeah.
And that's another way the sport's evolved. And I've always thought about like this. I was like, once a large engineering group really learns how to race and they really figured this out, people are going to be in trouble. And Toyota was the first one that did that. Ernie Spivak, that is in charge of the aero program over there, is a good friend of mine. And we worked together at EMS back in the early days. And we had some good times, and every once in a while I'll see him. My shift will be over at Aerodynamic when his is fixing to start, and I run into him in the parking lot. And, we'll shoot the breeze a little bit, but, he's one of those he's a really intelligent guy. And it's like once he got it, he was able to roll with it. I mean, and their season is speaking for itself, as well as last year too. When they redesigned their car, they hit it out of the park. There's no doubt about it.
I've heard some grumblings about what they got going on out there, and I'm not going to say any of it, but like it's stuff that what you have said, like that mind blowing stuff that they're doing now, like it's
Well, in their engine deals in California, and I'm sure that was a tough hurdle to get over, because you got logistics, you're putting stuff on airplanes, there's travel time, and the thing of it is you got to start somewhere, and you think, okay, if you got 10 Toyota teams, you got to have 50 motors to start the season with. You have 50 motors on the floor.
Yeah.
You know, because you got downforce races coming up after that. You got test motors. You know, people need mock-up motors to put in their test cars. You know, there's a lot that has to go on. So at some point they have to stop and they have to manufacture. And then, you know, as engine specs go, you know, you don't just add some Bondo to those or trim a little bit off here. Like it's a design deal. It's a manufacturing deal. Then it's got to be proven that it can withstand the torture it's fixing to go through. You know, because there's you don't take chances. You can't. You can't just say, well, I think this is better. You have to know it's better because now everybody's accountable. Everybody's initials are on the list. You know, everybody's accountable for something.
What stopped Timmy Petchek from becoming a crew chief?
I never wanted to be a crew chief, ever.
Why not?
I just never did. I always wanted to be the guy that took care of them.
You seem like everything that you've said up until this point seems like you'd be the perfect, like, you know, I want to go racing with you. You know, like that's...
Yeah, I've never had the desire to be a crew chief ever. I never did. I never had the desire to drive. I've never had the desire to be a crew chief. I mean, you know, I enjoyed the engine thing because my uncle built them. But then the aero side, so you had the engine on one shoulder and the aero side was on the other shoulder. And I think the fact that you physically made the body stuff is what did it for me. Where like engine blocks and heads and intake manifolds, you know, they come from somewhere else and you might modify them. But even like the engines now, you know, those aren't blocks that they're going to the junkyard to find a certain card that had a certain code on a block because the cylinder walls are thick or something like that. These things are made for what they do. They're CNC'd from scratch to do what they do. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's the thing about it. You know, that's just how different of a time is. Everything is built for a specific purpose. It's not some special part you go find somewhere and hope that you find a set of double hump camel heads or whatever it is because you can put 202 valves in them instead of 170s or 175s or whatever the case may be. You know, there was always little things about certain parts that made them better than the absolute stock stuff. You know, you could take them farther because whether it was wall thicknesses or water jacket thicknesses or it had more oil galleys or it had 4-bolt mains instead of 2-bolt mains, you know, now the stuff is made to race. It's made to get tortured. It's made to take it. You know, it's made to take the heat. It's, you know, the water temperatures you run now. You know, you pressurize the system, you can raise the boiling point. You can run more tape. You got more tape, you got more downforce. You got more downforce, you got more speed. You know, there's ways to do things, you know what I mean? But I'm not the only guy that knows that. There's other guys that know that and they've perfected it. You know, this is just paying attention to how things are evolving. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, and I can go back to that tape thing because they'll tell us, the crew, when you take this piece of tape, put it here. Don't put it there, put it here. You know, cover up this much. Don't cover up that much. Don't cover up this much. Cover up exactly that much. Like, this is exactly what I want.
And that's because it is so scienced out that if you cover up one too many holes, you're going to have to come back down pit road because you're running hot. You're going to push the water out of it. And that's the thing. It's you know, I was always fascinated with radiator ductwork. And I used to build all kind of pieces for the inside of them back in the day. And, you know, you were trying to control the flow, but the problem was you couldn't control the weather. So depending on what time of the year it was, depending on which grill screen you ran and how much tape you ran on it. And so what you ended up doing, you know, the most efficient ductwork is an inlet that has the hole behind it that's the same size. The problem is you have to run a grill opening that, you know, it's the size of the ductwork behind it, but the problem is you're taping half of it off. So now there's like a void behind there. So then you went into, okay, I know that I'm going to have to add or take away tape. So what do I do to the face of my radiator to make the distribution better? So then you start working on these fabrics and different things that spread the flow out. So the whole face of the radiator is getting cool air and not just one side of it.
Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, like, even running your radiator fan while it's moving is slowing down the air into the radiator and cooling it down. So, like, you actually want to have the radiator fan off.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why you have to test every single thing. So, you know, there's times that, you know, you might think you could put some super fans in something and make the flow better, but actually slows it down and makes it worse. So you would have thought, man, I'm going to put a fan in here and I'm going to wake this deal up, and it actually hurts it. So That's why I'm not into no kind of voodoo. Like I'm all about generating ideas and I'm all about testing everything, but I will not shoot from the hip and just build something, send it to racetrack without data. Because I'm not doing that. I'm not smart enough to do that. I'll build it and test it, and I can tell you exactly what it does, and I can tell you what happened to your balance. I can tell you what happened to your side force, if it was better, if it was worse. That's the only way that I'm willing to do it. Like, I won't do anything blindfolded. I have to have data on it before I give it to you, or before I'll build it. I mean, I'll build it, but I won't build it without knowing what it does. Like, I won't pass it off to you without knowing what it does. Because the sport's too... I mean, you watch these next few races in the chase. There's no margin for error. The guy that makes the least amount of mistakes, that has the best luck, usually is the dude that ends up doing it. I mean, look at Homestead last year. I mean,
Carl Edwards was a caution away.
That's what I mean. And then you get a caution, and you got Jimmy Johnson licking his chops because he's like, you know what?
I've been here.
I know what adjustment I need, and I'm fixing to get it, and my pit crew's fixing to pull through for me, and it's fixing to be on. Like, it's fixing to be on. And he took Kyle Larson to school. But, Kyle Larson's only going to get better. And he learns from that kind of stuff. And he'll never forget that. Kyle Larson will never forget that last restart at Homestead. And he's a great race car driver. He's going to do a lot of good things. He's awesome. The guy's awesome. But it's like, Jimmy Johnson's to the point now where I don't even think his pulse goes up when he drives. To be honest with you, I don't even think his pulse goes up. I think he's so comfortable because he's been there so many times that, if he wins 8 this year, it's not going to surprise me. It's not going to surprise me if he wins Homestead. Yeah. And you think about last year, they were taking stuff off of his car on pit road because somebody saw something or somebody didn't like something, somebody ratted out on him, and he won anyway. So it's... But it's not that the way the decals it's not the way that the decals that were stacked on the A post were going to make or break them, but they damn sure weren't going to hurt them. So you know what I mean? I give them props. I give them props for a paint scheme that's got a decal overlapping in a certain sensitive, specific area that makes 20 or 30 pounds of downforce. I love it. I think it's great, and that's my point. All facets have to be taken care of. It's not just one thing. Everything works together as a system, just like your human body does.
Wringing it out.
Everything, you're getting every bit of snake oil you can get out of that thing.
Here, there's my final four.
That's a good final four.
For everyone at home, it's Truex, Larson, Keselowski, and Hamlin. That's my final four, and I did it off of stage wins and top fives. Whoever had the most.
It's definitely gonna be fun to watch for sure. But again, like, anything can happen. There's no doubt about it. Anything can happen.
Yeah, I mean, hell, this past weekend at Chicago, was it Truex got the penalty for, what was it, speeding on pit road?
Yeah.
Had to come back down. Ended up winning the race. Kyle had the 2 penalties back to back. That pretty much done him. He was in the win, gone. So that's why we race him.
Yeah.
If the fastest car was supposed to win every weekend, then we would just qualify and go home.
Yeah. And that's another thing too. It's in my opinion, the best NASCAR race all year long is when the trucks go to Eldora. And the average speed's only 75 miles an hour, and them guys are like elbows up, wheeling it, getting it done. Mm-hmm. And it's like one of the most fun, best races I think that you get to watch. And it's that the World Outlaw Sprint cars are in the same boat now. Donnie Schatz is a good friend of mine. Ricky Warner's his crew chief, and Scuba and all those guys on that car have been friends of mine for years, and they have enjoyed a lot of success, a lot of championships, a lot of Knoxville wins. And the Aero deal has been same thing. It's been evolving over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and now, especially Donnie's car, it's really, really good aero-wise. And I've been fortunate enough to work with Ricky Warner a lot on that kind of stuff, generate ideas and help them and go test with them and some different things like that. And when you take the green flag, you have to get as far away from the guy next to you as you can, because the air is so turbulent and so dirty that your car won't drive. Like they just spread out like a wasp. You know, like when wasps come off of a nest, they just spread out. Like when you take the green, you got to spread out, or you can't drive your car as fast because there's no air on it. So, I mean, it's the same thing everywhere. Even, you know, I just went to ZMAX over to the drag races in Concord this weekend, and it's, you know, I'm just dressed in jeans and a Harley Davidson t-shirt and some Chuck Taylors, you know, and a Bell helmet hat, walking around, and I'm looking at all the wickers on these cars and where they are and how tall they are and all the body stuff, and then, you know, how low drag the pro stock cars are, and you know, the wings on the top fuel cars, and how, you know, there's you look at Don Schumacher's cars and the way the cockpit closes, there's like a wicker up in front of where the injectors are. You know, I see all these tiny little things that probably a lot of other people aren't going to see, and it's, you know, that's just how nerdy I am. You know, you're just looking at it.
If you were to build the next gen Cup car, what would it look like?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would talk to somebody like David that knows the demographic of what we're going to sell to. What do those people want to see? Because if you can't sell the cars, it's not going to do anybody no good. So the car's got to be appealing to the group that'll buy them. So that's the first thing I would do. And I would have a marketing guy, you know, like him, do the research and say, hey, what age group is buying what? What are they into? Is it 2-door stuff? Is it 4-door stuff? You know, what kind of headlight? You know, everybody doesn't want a minivan. You know, you don't race them. Everybody doesn't want a station wagon. And I don't really know what, you know, kids are into nowadays. You know, like what kind of cars they look at. You know, I mean, you know, when I was a teenager, you know, I thought exotic cars were cool, but, you know, I liked Mustangs and Chevelles and Novas and Falcons and Galaxies and, you know, Fairlanes and Comets and, you know, all the stuff that you see at the drag strip. I mean, I thought all that stuff was cool, you know, but nowadays, I mean, I don't, you know, I see more kids driving jacked up 4-wheel drive trucks than anything now. So I don't really see as many 15, 16, 17-year-old kids driving hot rod cars. I see them driving jacked up trucks. So, you know, you definitely would want to do marketing research to find out, you know, what you're up against, and then obviously you got to sell a bunch of them. So you're gonna make a bunch of them, so you need to be able to sell them. So, like a Camry, you know, a lot of people buy Camrys, a lot of people buy Camaros, a lot of people buy Mustangs. So, you know, you definitely have to hit. I think there's definitely a certain mark that you got to hit, and then if there was some marketing research that backed up the fact that says, you know, this is what the people want. How do you make this thing competitive? Then you go to work on it to see if you can make it competitive. You know, see if you can hit the downforce numbers. You know, if you can make it on par with the Dodges and the Fords and the Chevrolets, the Pontiacs, you know, whoever's racing, you know, because NASCAR knows what those other cars blow. They know. They know what their balances are. They know what their total downforce numbers are. And, you know, back when I was on a General Motors team, you know, when GM bought your tunnel time, the first 2 runs of your tunnel shift were GM's, a full tape and a race tape. And their race tape was to their dimension on your grill. And that was their data. And then that way they could cover all their Chevrolet teams to say, you know, this guy's struggling or this guy has this much more, you know, how do we get this guy up here? Because, you know, Chevrolet wants all the Chevrolets to run up front. Toyota wants all the Toyotas to run up front. Ford wants all the Fords to run up front. So, you know, the manufacturers, it doesn't matter, you know, if you're a lower tier team, they still want to help you. They still want to give you everything they can give you or give you what you can afford to get, you know, to help you as much as they can.
Yeah, but how mad are you being this Chevy team and you've thought of this and you've done this, and then you go to this
well, because
tunnel.
There's a last time for everything. So like this car that we're racing now, next year we ain't going to be racing it no more. And that Camaro's going to run for a while, and it's going to take you 2 to 3 years to get all the snake oil out of it. You know, there's a lot of stones to turn over. So it doesn't really matter because what you're learning is yours. So you take that into the next car. You know, the next car that's coming down the road, you're taking that with you. You know, you don't really, I don't worry about that particular demographic because that car's not the only car that you're ever going to race. You know, because here's the deal. Just say the cars that are 28th to 40th. they probably don't have any 3D printer technology. You probably know they probably don't have any CAD stuff. There's a lot of things that they can experiment with because they're just trying to get to the next race. And then you go to an HMS or a Joe Gibbs or a Penske, and there's an engineering group of 15 to 40 or 50 people, and then you got a department head that passes off these projects, and people might work in groups of 2s or 3s or 5s and 6s to generate ideas, and a small group of guys isn't going to stay on par with that. It's not possible. It's not going to happen, because it's whether you're printing parts to put on your scale model or you're printing parts to put on your car to go to a wind tunnel test. And then what happens is when you print parts, they're perfect parts. So then if that particular part does work, now it's CAD, okay? Now you can make it with a machine, and now it's going to fit on your car. So you take the human element out of it. So it's not like you're bondoing a lip here or you're bondoing a radius there. You're growing a piece in a printer that you can bond to the car and decal over, and if that's the case, or an antenna, or an antenna mount, or anything. There's all kind of little things that that you can do, that you can make, that a machine will make for you now, and you can watch it make it right in front of your eyes. It starts stacking, and then you come back a couple hours later and there's your part.
So going back to this car, would you have a splitter or would you have a valence?
Well, I think that if you're going to have a splitter, you're going to have to call out probably a more strict set of rules. And I think where the technology is now, you could call out a demographic for a splitter bolt pattern. Everybody can duplicate it. It's not hard, And I wouldn't be surprised if down the road they don't hand you a splitter when you get to the racetrack. You might do a setup deal at the shop with one, but I wouldn't be real surprised if they don't hand you a splitter at the racetrack, and then then they'll check it on the smart level once you go through the room of doom, I call it. So
the room of doom.
I mean, it's everybody said when the COT car come out that nobody's gonna have a job anymore. Anybody was gonna be able to do it, and that could not be farther from the truth, because I can promise you, more cars have been getting built since 2008 than they were previous to 2008. You didn't bring a car home and take everything off of it from the door tops down and then send it to the sandblaster, run it through the chassis side, get the updates done on it, get it back over on the body plate, get it bodied, get it back into finish fab, get it crushed panel, get the duct work done, get the new windows made for it. Now it's going into the body shop to get the seams wiped, and wherever you may have some trickery that Bondo's involved, and it's getting painted and it's going back out on the floor. So you used to literally just paint from the A-post forward, wipe them down. You didn't change crush panels every single race. You didn't, you know what I mean? You took the motor out of it and you wiped it off and you cleaned it up. If something was broke, you fixed it. But now, because there's so much retrofitting, and because things have evolved so fast in there, and they just keep on evolving, that after a car races, you got to take it down that far, and it's got to go across your chassis plate. It's got to come back across your body plate. It's got to go back through finish fab, because you got to figure in this 2 to 3 weeks time, you've found another 20, 30 pounds of gains in the wind tunnel.
We'll do the race on Sunday. I'm off on Monday. I show back up for practice on Tuesday. When I walk in that shop on Tuesday, the car that we race Sunday is already completely stripped down. Nothing's on it. It's bare metal, the wraps off of it, and it's on casters. Yeah. There's nothing in it. Maybe the seat is still in it. Yeah. And it was like that in a day.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, you learn how to do it, you get trained how to do it. And then depending on which team you're on, most of those parts might have to go in the backup car that you're taking the next week. You might have to put your wire and harness in your Speedway backup car, or, that stuff's expensive, or your dash, or, you got the digital dash now. Some teams don't have a digital dash for every single car and every single backup car and every single test car. So some teams don't have enough seats for every car to have its own seat, so, a lot of that can be part of it too. And then it's, even at HMS, the stuff evolves so much that, you run a car twice and then you make a backup car out of it, and then it was on a time limit after that, and then you took, most of the parts off of it, and then the chassis goes to foils, scrap metal, out on 49. You cut it up with a torch. There's nothing left of it.
Yeah.
And it gets put in a bin, and they get loaded on the rollbacks, and they go dump them out, and you build new ones, because the new ones you built are going to be better than the ones you just cut up because of evolution.
And that's crazy that it's always like not even year to year, week to week, race to race. This stuff's evolving.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And you're still in such a tight box.
I'm telling you, man, I was telling, you guys had Zach Hayes on a week or so ago or something like that. But me and Zach Hayes talk a lot, and it is amazing what we do, the quality that we maintain in the time frames we maintain it in. I don't know that the real world could handle us, to be honest with you. Like, I don't
I think he
know
said
that,
the same thing about you.
Yeah, it's I'm just talking about the sport in general.
Oh, yeah.
Like the people that work in the Cup business, the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series. I mean, we have never not made a deadline. We've never not made it to a test. We've never not made it to the wind tunnel. And I can promise you, the car that's going to the test or to the wind tunnel is the one that is the farthest away from being done. Every time. And we have never, ever, ever not made it. Ever.
Yeah,
So that in itself is like, when I think about little things like that, there's no, we're not going to make it this week. We'll just see you guys next week. That is never the case. No is never the answer. Never.
Yeah, the goal is to have you and Zach on here at the same time.
Yeah, you'll have a good time.
You said the same thing.
Well, like Zach and I, we have a lot of interests outside of the sport that we work in now, and a lot of mornings we meet at the Summit Coffee in Davidson, North Carolina. It's like central to where we both live. It's a little place called Summit Coffee in Davidson, and we'll meet there on Sunday mornings at 7, and we'll sit for a couple hours, and we'll brainstorm on some other things, some different things that we have interest in. And there's a lot of layers to that guy. He's a fun guy to talk to. He's good times.
I was going to say that we don't have another Saturday race until after Thanksgiving. But if you guys still do that in the off season, I definitely want to sit in on one of those.
Yeah,
one of those coffee.
We don't go every Sunday, but like this Sunday we might go. But it's just a couple hours, just to because Davidson's a neat little town. It's like a movie set. When you're there early in the morning, you kind of got the place to yourself, and it's just I guess it's just maybe when you have kids, you just have, like, I spend all the time with my little boy that I can, so I don't do anything work-related until after he goes to sleep. If I happen to do something work-related that night, I'll do it after he goes to sleep. And then usually you just kind of find things to do before they wake up. So usually he's just getting up by the time I get home, so you don't miss anything. You're there when he wakes up. So it's just I don't know if it's just a dad thing or what it is, but it's everything's about balance one way or the other. And it's like I was saying before, you make friends that really just turn into family, and there's a few of them that you spend time with away from the shop here and there.
Mm-hmm. What do you got, David?
I was gonna say, if the aliens were ever to talk to two people on this earth, it would definitely be you and Zach.
Well, I mean, I think I'm a pretty boring guy, to be honest with you, because I'm as nerdy as they get. I'm as nerdy as they get. So, really,
I've gotten smarter just in
my IQ has skyrocketed.
I like to have a good time, and I like to go out a little bit, but it's just gotta, it's pretty much a good band's got to be there if you want me to go, number one, if I'm going to go out. So I like a good rock and roll band. I'm actually going to my first ride-in bike show tomorrow night that Tilly Harley-Davidson's doing in Mooresville at a place called Kickback Jack. So they have a big outdoor area, and it's the last bike night of the year. So I'm going to go there and try to win me a first-place trophy with my rigid Springer. And then that was something I always wanted to do, and I didn't want to buy one. I couldn't be a fabricator and buy one. I had to build my own. And then it was like once I met Billy Lane and a bunch of those bike builders, Dave Perowitz and Indian Larry and, Paul Cox and Keno and, Kendall Johnson, I love what those guys do. I love their lifestyles. I love what they do. And I do not call myself a biker. I am not a biker. I'm an enthusiast. I'm a guy that loves Harley Davidsons. So and I've wanted one since I was a young kid, 6, 7 years old. I remember, hearing them for the first time, and I've always loved the way they sounded. I love them because they're loud, and I like them because you can shut them off. That's why I never got into horses. A horse has a mind of its own. Oh, Harley, you can just hit the kill switch on it. So, it was really fun to build a bike, and it was the thing of it is that thing was a picture in my head, and now it's a reality. And it's a reality because of teammates and resources and machines and all the things that you have access to. And, that's just how they come about. So it takes more time to do it because you don't have as much time to do it. But then once you get it done, it's just something cool. So it's, I don't want to call it my therapist, but it's nice to take a ride through the North Carolina countryside for an hour or so here and there and just roll with it, just ride easy and, and every once in a while get on it, but that's just good times. And, to be around some like-minded people that most of which don't have anything to do with your career. So it's almost like you have you have an outlet where what you have in common with the next guy is, motorcycles and having a beer and, maybe a little something to eat and hearing some music, and you just kind of decompress for an hour or two and you go home.
You're so into it and you're so busy, like you don't really take that much, like your time away is even like scheduled, like you're...
Yeah, everything is everything's always scheduled, and that's how I do my home life. I lay it out to where, when I get home on Fridays, like I do all my laundry and I go to the grocery store and I get everything done. So like Saturdays and Sundays, I can just hang out with my little boy and, if he wants to cook on the grill or he wants to go out in the canoe or, whatever he wants to do, like pumpkin pickings coming up, different little things like that. Then you can just say, yeah, let's go. You don't ever have to say, well, I got to do this or I got to do that. So I do everything the night before. That's just me. Like my clothes, my coffee's in the coffee maker. I mean, like, my pots my pans on the stove with the plate and a fork and a spatula beside it that I'm going to cook my eggs and sausage in the next morning. You know what I mean? Like there's no getting nothing out. It's like spray the pan in the pan, light the burner and get going, Yep. Plug your pot in. You don't do nothing, it's because I just do it all the night before.
Mm-hmm. But you seem like a guy that when you're going and looking at the Halloween pumpkins, that you'll see a curve of the stem of the pumpkin and be like, that's the curve that I gotta have, like that's...
I'm not that bad. Like if you open up my refrigerator, all the labels are turned out where you can read everything. Like you open up my spice cabinet, everything's shortest to tallest and all the labels are out, you know what I mean? So I do have a fair amount of OCD, but I just like things nice, neat and clean. I like to be able, like even my toolbox, like when people pull the drawers from my toolbox open, they're like, dude, what's wrong with you? Because everything, like my clamp drawer and everything's shortest to tallest and it all has a place. And I know if something's not in there. You know what I mean? When I pull a drawer open, I know if something's not in there because there's a void because of the way things are laid in there. So it's and
there's even a little mark in the cushion.
Yeah,
that you could probably read exactly what size it was.
There's not one thing. There's not one thing laying on top of the other one.
My big tick is a picture that's kind of crooked on the wall.
I don't like crooked pictures either. I mean, like I hate that. I don't like crooked pictures. I don't like nothing on the floor. If I walk on my floor and I feel something, like I'm like, I get it.
Vacuum.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, last Saturday I pulled my refrigerator out from the wall and I vacuumed. You know what I mean? The vents, everything on the refrigerator. You know what I mean? That's just me. And then probably this weekend I'll pull the dryer out and vacuum out around it. I just stay on top of that stuff, man.
I appreciate the hell out of you coming on. Like I've learned so much. Like this was a trip.
I enjoyed it, dude. I really did, man.
Please come back.
I will.
Definitely please come back.
We need Petchek part 2.
I guess part 2 is what I'm working on now. I'm like wondering what is my part 2? What's my part 2 going to be? Because I might not do the racing thing for 2 or 3 more years.
I asked you one question and you talked for an hour.
Did you?
Yeah. I only asked you one question.
Yeah.
And then you just took off, and then we almost interrupted you and almost screwed up the whole thing.
Well, I was happy to contribute to the podcast.
Like you're rattled. We could sit here and say, "Hey,
this
all the aliens talk to you," and then you'll give me 9 reasons why they would.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing. Like, I'm not. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so like I understand that there's a side of the moon we can't see and all that kind of stuff, and I don't get into them games. Like if some people think there's people living on the other side of the moon and this, that, and the other. I don't get any of that stuff. I stay in the here and now. I don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always talk to Hayes about this. It's, people can't keep secrets.
No.
You're not going to keep something that big, aliens were here or we didn't go to the moon or the earth is flat or something. It's, like people can't keep little secrets.
No, and I agree with you 100%. That's why I don't even, I don't follow any of it. I mean, I'm probably more into the weather. I'm a weather nerd for sure. I watch the Weather Channel every morning and every night. And that's how I plan my week. I know if I need an umbrella in my truck or whatever I need, or when it's time to put a jacket in my truck, and some gloves. I mean, I just stay on it, man. I always paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really seem like you have time for all that make-believe stuff anyway.
Yeah, I don't. I tell you what, man, a cold can of beer and a good game of pool and a couple of good songs in a jukebox goes a long way, man. It's
I could see you being a pool player.
It's good times.
Hitting those angles, hitting that English.
I do enjoy playing pool.
Wow.
All right, man. Are you on social media at all? You on Twitter, Instagram?
No, I have.
You ain't got time for it?
I've stayed numb from all that stuff.
Hell, you might want to get on. You might see some secrets of a lot of pictures on Instagram.
I've thought about doing a Twitter account, but I'm just not. I'm the oddball because I'm the one guy that you see that is not walking looking at his phone. So if I go in somewhere and get a cup of coffee or, I go into a restaurant, I don't even have my phone with me. And if I didn't have a kid, I probably wouldn't even have a phone, to be honest with you. So I probably got a lot to learn in that respect, but I'm a pretty social guy, so I don't, I'll talk to you. I've never met a stranger, I guess you'd say. So, nobody's safe for me. Like, I'm going to talk to anybody. Like, I can't, if I'm in a line somewhere and everybody's on their phone, I'm kind of blown away by that. I'm like, are you really that into what's on your phone that you're not even paying attention to what's around you? Mm-hmm. You're not paying attention to who's coming through the door. You're not paying attention to who's standing around you. And I can't do that. I can't be disconnected like that. I can't do it.
But it's really being connected, though.
Well, I'm not saying that you're not being connected, but my thing is I don't.
Connected to what?
If I check my Facebook, if I check my Facebook a couple times a day, my whole thing with Facebook was my friends from high school were on there. That's the only reason I ever did it. Mm-hmm. And then, your friends from the garage area are on there, and your teammates are on there, and then your friends on other teams are on there. So the thing about my Facebook is, like, you might have people that have 3,500 friends, but everybody that's on my Facebook page, I know them personally. Mm-hmm. That's just how you get on there. You're not, if I don't know you, you're not, it's just the way it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was only up until recently that I started friending people that, that I didn't really know. I would look at like the mutual friends. Yeah. And I would see, okay, if this guy can put up with him.
I mean, I think it's neat because, I'm 45 years old. So I remember when you had to stop using payphone, landline days, payphone days. So it is really neat that I can be in another town. I can be in Texas at the racetrack, or I can be in the Florida Keys, and then you can talk to somebody real time through your phone. That's pretty cool. I mean, that's straight up Star Trek stuff from 1970. You know what I mean? Like that technology is pretty neat. And, when I think about phones and solar and different things like that, the stuff now is going to be antiquated in 5 more years. It's not even going to be, it's going to be an antique. Yeah. And it's only going to keep evolving faster. Mm-hmm. It's only going to keep going faster because people want more and they want it right now. And
there's countries that are skipping landlines altogether and going straight to wireless stuff. Yeah. They're not even putting up the poles and the lines and all that stuff.
Well, that's
they're going
what I mean.
Straight to wireless.
Look how much less material that is.
Which is right up your alley.
There you go.
Add lightness.
Low light and left. High speed and low drag.
Low light and left.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, that's not mine. I can't take credit for that. It's like the word "buh." You know, everybody say, "Hey, buh, what's up, buh?" I mean, that's Danny Lawrence's word from RCR, the old engine guy from RCR. And then Gene Dehart got it from him. And then Gene Dehart started saying it because he was a fabricator up there at RCR for years when he was one of the Flying Aces, one of the original Flying Aces. And then when I met him, I started saying "buh," and now everybody in my family says "buh." You know, so it's like, you know, this word "buh" has taken over. You know, everybody's "buh" now. Come on, buh.
Yeah.
Work with me, buh.
Yeah, I'll use it at like, you know, certain instances. You know,
Well, I use it all the time. Like, that's like one of my favorite words.
I always use it. Come on, buh.
Come on, buh, let's go. Because then you don't got to know nobody's name. Everybody's buh. It covers the whole spectrum. Everybody can be buh.
Yeah, I've been, you know.
It don't matter if it's male or female. Everybody can be buh.
You know, and that's the thing. You start working with a new crew chief or something like that. I've been Doug, Steve,
Oh,
Ralph.
yeah.
You know, hey Carl. You know, like,
Yeah.
you know, just been all kinds. It's Zach. I know it doesn't matter. So, all right. Well, hey man, thank you for coming on again.
I really appreciate it. I had a great time.
But this is awesome. Probably next time have you and Hayes on together, and that will be a trip to be. If you listen to this podcast, I hope your mind is blown just as much as me. Be sure to check out the website youngandpruitt.com, at Young and Pruitt on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me at JackmanZack on Twitter and Instagram. David over here at
Tall Guy Turbo on both.
And please, if you've listened to this, send us a tweet, shout out to us somehow. Let us know that you're listening. You know, we want some feedback. So again, thanks Timmy for coming on.
Thank you guys.
I appreciate it. And this is Young and Pruitt Podcast. See ya.